Chapter 305. Hearing this question, Drew laughed and said, "I'm just curious. By the way, I also brought back a gift for you. It's in my suitcase. I'll give it to you tonight." "You must be hiding something from me." Eric knocked on the girl's head and said, "If you get into trouble, you better not let me be the last to know. Otherwise, I won't care about you." If you don't care, who will?" After Eric sat down in the office chair, the girl let go of his arm and said. Eric smiled and picked up the folder on the table. He opened it and said casually, "Oh, you're still blaming me." "This is obvious," the girl said. She looked at the documents in Eric's hand and asked casually, "What are these?" "The list of candidates for the male cast of Ghost," Eric answered. The little girl casually pulled out a few pieces of information and pulled a chair over to flip through them, exclaiming, "Wow, he's so handsome." Eric shook his head helplessly and didn't say anything. He continued to flip through the pages. The casting for Ghost was very different from the casting for Eric's previous movies. In the past, he would release the news of the audition and then accept the files submitted by the actors for the audition. However, with Eric's current status, if he were to use the method of fishing for fish in the sea for casting, the number of files he would receive would probably explode Firefly's mailroom. Furthermore, there would be a huge problem with the selection process. Therefore, a series of prerequisites were set for the 3 major agencies for the casting of Ghost this time, so that they could recommend qualified actors. Although many actors from small agencies might lose the opportunity because of this, it could not be helped. Hollywood had always been so unfair. No one could change it. Even so, Eric now had hundreds of copies of the male lead actor's information in his hands. As for the original male and female lead of Ghost, Eric did not consider it at the beginning. Because of some information in his memory, Eric did not like Demi Moore. This reason was enough. With his current status, there was no need to explain the reason to anyone. As for Patrick Swayze, Eric still felt that he was more suitable to act in an action film. The male lead in the movie, Sam, was set to be a department manager of a Wall Street investment bank. However, Eric felt that Patrick Swayze was more suitable to play the security guard at the entrance of the investment bank. In his memory, Demi Moore's performance in Ghost was barely commendable, but Patrick Swayze was completely a male vase, and a very ugly one at that. Eric felt that the male lead of this movie should first have the aura of a successful bank manager. Secondly, it would be best if he had a literary aura. Actually, when he was considering the male lead, he had quickly thought of someone. That's right, Tom Cruise. Cruise's acting skills, image, and box office appeal were all in line with Eric's requirements. Although there was some estrangement between the two of them because of their last cooperation in Dark War, Eric still sent an invitation to Cruise. Cruise also responded. There were no details, only an appointment for a face-to-face meeting the next day. Cruise had not produced any movies since he left CAA to set up his own production company. However, Eric also asked someone to find out that Cruise's production company was now preparing for a movie. It was an investment from Paramount, and Cruise and his partner, Paula Wagner, were both producers. Therefore, although Eric agreed to meet the next day, he did not have high expectations for Cruise's participation in Ghost. It was better to patiently choose from the actors in front of him. Eric was looking at the information in the study, chatting with Nicole from time to time. Before he knew it, the sky outside had turned completely dark. Nicole called the two of them to finish dinner at around 7 o'clock. "Let's go and have dinner. I'm sure you're hungry. By the way, tonight's the premiere of Who Will Be a Millionaire? I put all the questions you've been thinking about in the question bank. They might appear tonight," Eric said as he walked out of the study with Nicole. In the dining room, Drew sat at the table and talked about what he had seen during the filming of The Silence of the Lambs in Pennsylvania. Nicole sat next to Eric and put food in his bowl from time to time. She looked gentle and considerate. If the girl who spoke was 10 years younger, they would look like a family of 3. After dinner, Drew could not wait to go to a small living room. He turned on the TV and tuned to Fox. The show had not started yet. Soon, Eric carried a laptop into the living room. He sat down on the sofa, put the laptop on his knees, and tapped on it casually. Even though it was IBM's latest laptop, It was still very clumsy and ugly compared to the one in his previous life. Moreover, the specs were so low that it made one's hair stand on end. However, it was impossible to find a good laptop on the market, so Eric could only make do with it. Anyway, he was only writing scripts and looking at documents. Although the computer's memory was very low, it was enough for office use. After Nicole finished washing the dishes, she quickly carried a plate of fruit into the living room and sat down on the other side of Eric. She looked at Eric's nimble fingers on the keyboard, and a trace of admiration flashed in her eyes. What did this man not know? Wow, it's starting. Eric, don't be busy. Let's watch TV, okay? Eric nodded and closed the laptop. Who Will Become a Millionaire was very simple. There was a stage in the middle. The host and the contestants sat on both sides. Below the stage was a circle of live audience. Behind the stage was a big screen. The questions could be seen on the screen. The contestants were divided into several groups. Each group had to go through a short round of competition. Whoever answered enough questions first would get the chance to go on stage and answer the questions face-to-face with the host. Hey Eric, why do I feel like it's very different from the proposal I've seen before? Many of the settings aren't used, and the questions aren't categorized. I remember that in the proposal you wrote, there was a setting where the guests could choose a certain type of question. Oh, I'm so disappointed, Drew complained as he leaned on Eric. Eric casually explained, this is a strategy. What strategy? Drew asked curiously. Nicole also looked over. This is done to facilitate the upgrading of the show and to prolong the life of the show. If the show is set to be perfect from the beginning, then there won't be much room for change in the future. This way, when the audience gets tired of it, the life of the show will come to an end. But now, the show doesn't seem to be perfect at the beginning. Some of the novelty segments are kept. After a period of time, when the audience gets tired of the show and the ratings drop, they will be pushed out in time to arouse the audience's interest again. Just like the clothes that you girls wear, every year those clothing companies will come out with new styles. Although the changes are not too big, as long as there is this gimmick and appropriate advertising, then customers will be able to easily swipe their cards and pay for it. So that's how it is. The girl nodded her head in understanding. Nicole also revealed a thoughtful expression. On the TV, the first contestant had been selected and stepped onto the middle stage. After a simple self-introduction, they quickly began to answer the questions. Although some of the segments at the beginning of the show were relatively simple, in terms of setting the atmosphere, Firefly and Fox put in a lot of effort. Every sentence from the host, every prompt from the TV, and even the countdown sound made the audience nervous. Moreover, the questions at the beginning were very simple. Although a single guest on the stage might hesitate, if there was a family sitting in front of the TV, they might be able to come up with an answer after a few words of discussion. This situation also made the audience in front of the TV feel a sense of superiority, and quickly fell in love with this kind of show. Wow, what's the highest plateau in the world? You don't even know such a simple question. Even I know. Sigh Eric, is this a shill you guys hired? You're deliberately keeping people in suspense. Drew looked at the hesitant middle-aged man from Ohio on the TV and asked suspiciously. Eric shrugged and said, how is that possible? This show pursues authenticity. These people were selected from all over the United States. Plus, other TV stations and media are watching. If we found someone to fake this and it was exposed, it would be very harmful to the popularity of the show. Although this is indeed a very simple question, everyone has their own knowledge blind spots. No one can say for sure when they will encounter a bottleneck. Drew nodded and reluctantly believed Eric's words. After the guest on the TV used this opportunity to ask for help, he successfully completed the question. Eric did not follow the British version's system of 15 questions. Instead, he chose 12 questions and also set 2 guaranteed points for the 5th and 10th questions. Because it was the first show, the production team specifically chose some very outstanding guests. Also, they did not mind a millionaire appearing on the first show. This would stimulate the audience's interest. Because he just came back from the East Coast, Drew insisted on watching more than half of the show before he fell asleep on Eric's lap. When the show was about to end, the phone in the living room rang. Nicole consciously stood up and picked up the phone. Eric picked up the call and said a few words before hanging up. "What's up?" Nicole vaguely heard a few words and asked curiously. "The rough ratings are out." Eric looked at Nicole and said calmly, "The peak ratings are 33 million, the average is 28 million, not as good as Friends." Nicole secretly clicked her tongue. An average of 28 million viewers. After stabilizing, it would definitely be a high-rating show with more than 20 million viewers. For a show like this, the advertising fee for each episode was no less than $5 million, which was the same as her current salary. It was already good enough for her to take on 1 or 2 movies a year. Her salary was also very unstable. However, this show could earn her $5 million every week. If her salary was maintained at the current level, this show's annual income was probably equivalent to her acting in movies for a lifetime. "Eric, how much can Firefly get from this show?" Nicole could not help but ask. Eric looked at the girl. Although this was not too important, it was not suitable to announce it everywhere. "We share the copyright with Fox, so the advertising fee is split 50/50. The producers and the broadcasters are also split 50/50. Moreover, the profits from the videotapes of such variety shows were very small. Therefore, even if the viewership ratings were similar to that of Friends, the final profits would be far less than that of Friends." However, this kind of show can bring more popularity. Any TV series has an age limit, but this variety show does not have many restrictions. I believe that people from 8 to 80 years old will be very interested. Although Eric said a little too much, Nicole was quickly calculating in her heart. Then she realized that Eric could get $1 million every week from this movie. $1 million every week. Compared to this, her current salary was not even worth mentioning. The show on the TV had unknowingly ended. Eric looked strangely at Nicole, who was still sitting on the sofa thoughtfully. He picked up the sleeping girl and said, "It's late, you should rest early. I'll send Drew back to his room." "Oh, okay." Nicole nodded quickly. Eric sent Drew back to his room, and then went back to his own room to wash up. Not long after he turned off the lights, the bedroom door was gently pushed open. "Drew, is that you?" Eric asked, thinking that the girl had come to get tired of him again. "It's me," Nicole said softly in the dim light. Eric was about to turn on the lights when he heard Nicole's voice, but he stopped. The girl floated over and went into his arms. The sound of water in the bathroom stopped after a while. Eric muttered in his heart that women were troublesome to take a shower, but he did not care. He turned his body and closed his eyes slightly. After a while, Nicole came out again and curled up in Eric's arms. "By the way, Nicole, we didn't use any safety measures just now. Is it okay?" Nicole hesitated for a moment, as if she was thinking about something, but she quickly understood. She shook her head gently and said to Eric, "Don't worry, it's okay." Eric paused. At this time, he could not say anything harsh. He could only say again, "I don't want to have a child so early. Now is not a good time. I'm not sure if I can be a good father if I have a child." "I understand." Nicole nodded obediently in the dark. Her eyes flickered a few times, then dimmed. Although she had some thoughts in her heart, if she still ignored Eric's words, then there would be no good result. Eric seemed to understand Nicole's disappointment, and he quickly comforted her. "By the way, I have a date with Tom Cruise tomorrow. I need a female companion. You can come with me." "Tom Cruise?" Nicole asked. She didn't understand why Eric would mention this person inexplicably. She still had some understanding of Eric's habits. If there was no reason, Eric would not suddenly do such an inexplicable thing. Eric said, "Yes, it's about the male lead of Ghost. To be honest, I don't like him. However, he is indeed very suitable for this role, but I don't have much hope. I'm just trying to get in touch with him. Cruise now has his own production company. I think the other party's offer will definitely not be too low. The possibility of negotiation is very low." "Oh." Nicole nodded noncommittally. At noon the next day, Eric took Nicole to a famous restaurant in Beverly Hills. After saying a few words to the waiter, a waiter took him and Nicole to the prearranged seats. Looking at the time, it was almost 12 o'clock. There were less than 5 minutes before the appointed time. Eric originally thought that Cruz should have arrived long ago, but he did not expect that the other party had not arrived yet. In this case, he had no expectations for the purpose of this time. Nicole sat next to Eric, looking at the menu in her hand in boredom. She asked Eric curiously, "It should be here, right?" Obviously, the girl had already felt that something was wrong. Eric smiled awkwardly. There was a trace of displeasure in his heart, but he did not show it. He said, "Don't worry. Yes, but in Hollywood, there are still people who can make me wait." Nicole nodded noncommittally. She could see that Eric was a little absent-minded. Therefore, she also realized that this meeting would not be smooth. 12 o'clock passed quickly, and Cruz still did not appear. Eric played with the tableware in his hand. He was about to ask the waiter to serve a cup of coffee for the two, and continued to wait when Cruz's voice sounded behind him. "I'm really sorry, Eric. There was a traffic jam on the road. You know, in a place like Los Angeles, there are traffic jams almost every day. Although I was prepared in advance, I still accidentally ate it," Cruz said. But it was obvious that the other party's face was not too apologetic. "It's okay. We just arrived." Eric shook hands with the other party, and then shook hands with Paula Wagner, who was next to Cruz. Paula Wagner also apologized to Eric. Her attitude was much more sincere than Cruz's. Chapter 306. "Hi, Miss Kidman, I'm Tom Cruise. You can call me Tommy. Wow, you're so pretty, even prettier than in the movies. Can I call you Nicole?" As Eric was chatting with Paula Wagner, he heard Tom Cruise's courteous voice behind him. "Of course, Mr. Cruise," Nicole's voice sounding a little distant. However, Cruz didn't seem to notice anything and began to talk about other topics. Paula Wagner smiled awkwardly at Eric, secretly blaming Cruz for his inappropriate behavior. Nicole Kidman was Eric's female companion, so their relationship was obvious. Eric turned his head and saw that Cruz had already sat opposite Nicole. He had no choice but to say to Paula Wagner, "Then Miss Wagner, let's sit down too." "Okay, Eric, I'm really sorry," Paula Wagner said apologetically in a soft voice. "It's nothing," Eric said, returning to the table and sitting down. He called the waiter over, and they began to order. "Nicole, the pan-fried foie gras here is very good. It's said that the ingredients are all flown in directly from France. I think you should have one," Cruz said to Nicole with a smile after flipping through the menu for a while. "Sorry, Mr. Cruz, I'm on a diet." Nicole shook her head gently, then ordered a salad from the waiter and closed the menu. The smile on Cruz's face faded a little, but there was more interest in his eyes. Eric and Paula Wagner quickly finished ordering. After the waiter left, Cruz said without hesitation, "I'm sorry, Eric. I've read the script of Ghost, but the movie that Paula and I are working on is about to start shooting, so I definitely can't take on that role. To be honest, I think that playing a ghost sounds stupid. Also, I've studied the whole script and didn't find anything interesting. I suggest that you try another movie, such as the second part of Dark War. Although I can't take part in it, I believe that with the popularity of the first movie, the box office success is assured." Hearing Cruz's words, Paula Wagner placed her hand on her forehead and gently rubbed her temple twice. Clearly, Cruz's old habit of thinking too highly of himself had resurfaced. He had completely forgotten her previous instructions. Nicole opened her mouth slightly, then picked up the juice in front of her, and put it to her mouth to hide the sneer on her face. Eric put his hands on the table and kept rubbing them, listening to Cruz's words with great interest. When Cruz finished, Eric looked at him with great interest and said, "In that case, Tommy, why did you invite me here today?" Paula Wagner was afraid that Tom Cruise would say something inappropriate, so she quickly answered Eric's question and said, "Mr. Williams, Tommy is such a person. He doesn't like to keep anything to himself, so please don't mind him. We think that the script of Ghost is very good, but Tommy's schedule has already been arranged, so we can't work together this time." "Oh, then this time," Eric continued. Tom Cruise was about to speak when he felt his calf being kicked under the table. He looked at Paula Wagner and saw that she had a faint pleading look on her face, so he could only shrug and shut his mouth. Seeing that Tom Cruise finally stopped talking, Paula Wagner was relieved. She said to Eric, "Mr. Williams, Didn't Firefly's Flower Pictures acquire the rights to many novels and movies last year? One of them is a TV series called Mission Impossible. I want to ask if you can transfer it to us. We'll definitely give you a very reasonable price. Eric raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, Ms. Wagner, why are you interested in this TV series? If it's a movie, it should be a spy action movie. It's very different from Tom's current screen image. Hearing Eric's words, Cruz couldn't help but interrupt again. See, Paula, Eric also thinks so I think it's better not to mention this matter anymore. I've already said that I'm not suitable for this kind of pure action movie. That's the role that Schwarzenegger or Stallone should play. I'm more suitable for dramas. Even if there are some action elements mixed in, it should be like Top Gun a few years ago and our recent movie. Eric, you should think so too, right? Eric smiled and echoed. Of course, I also think that Tommy is more suitable for a narrative-driven genre film. It's very risky to change the genre rashly. Paula Wagner didn't know how to continue with the two men's interruption. She had a troubled look on her face as she helplessly looked at the man beside her who was feeling smug after being acknowledged. She then looked at Eric, who had a faint smile on his face. She didn't know why, but she felt that Eric's smile was a little strange. Bypassing the matter of the original Mission Impossible TV series, Eric quickly said, Tommy, let's talk about the movie you've been preparing recently. I'm sure many fans are looking forward to it. That's for sure. Tom Cruise was suddenly interested, but he kept looking at Nicole in front of him and said, a few years ago, when Mr. Paul Newman and I were working together on The True Color of Money, I became interested in racing, so I've always wanted to make a racing movie. In the script, the racing scenes in this movie will be very grand and exciting. Paramount has promised to invest $60 million in this movie. I believe that this movie will definitely achieve the box office glory of 1980's Top Gun. By the way, Nicole, the movie just happens to lack a female lead. Do you want to try? From the first time I saw you, I felt that you were very suitable for the role of Claire. When Nicole heard that the movie was worth $60 million, she immediately took action. She glanced at Eric and saw that the man had a non-committal look on his face, so she asked tentatively, Mr. Cruise, can you tell me more about this role? Of course, Claire is a doctor, and the male lead, Cole, met after a racing accident. Claire was quickly moved by Cole's strength and unyielding spirit, and fell in love with the male lead. Cruise spoke excitedly for 7 or 8 minutes. He only reluctantly paused when the waiter served them food. Nicole also tried to sound him out from time to time. Listening to the couple's conversation, Paula Wagner looked at Eric worriedly. Seeing that Eric was enjoying the food in front of him as if nothing had happened, she was slightly relieved. Ms. Wagner, are you still Tom's agent? Eric didn't pay attention to the couple's conversation. After eating a few mouthfuls of food, he suddenly raised his head and asked Paula Wagner. Paula Wagner didn't know why Eric suddenly asked this question, but she quickly answered, No, I'm now in charge of C/W Productions, so Tom has a new agent named Paula Jinsley. Eric sighed in his heart. Tom Cruise was really lucky. Even though he, an outsider, had entered this time and space, the two women who were very important to his career still appeared by his side. Paula Wagner could be said to be Tom Cruise's great benefactor. She had brought Cruise from a nobody to the A-list Hollywood superstars. Later, she had helped Cruise establish a production company, and acted as the producer for a series of Cruise's movies. It could be said that half of Cruise's success could be attributed to Paula Wagner. After that, Cruise and Paula Wagner established the Cruise/Wagner Production Company. Paula Wagner became the head of the production company, and Cruise changed to another agent, Pi Jinsley. This female agent was also very capable. She had taken over Paula Wagner's position, and conscientiously managed Cruise's affairs for 14 years. In more than a decade, although Cruise had caused a lot of trouble, and his conduct was a mess, under Paula Jinsley's protection, Cruise's public image had always been flawless. In his previous life, both Cruise and Nicole had Paula Jinsley as their agents. However, after Cruise and Nicole's divorce, Cruise's own career didn't improve much, but Nicole's skyrocketed. Not only was she crowned Best Actress at the Oscars, but she also entered the 20 million pay club. Cruise felt extremely unbalanced in his heart. He casually found an excuse that Pi Jinsley's public relations was not good at the Oscars and fired this hardworking agent. Then he trivially asked his sister, who had no professional experience, to be his agent. It didn't take long for Cruise to taste the consequences of his actions. Without a strong agent to negotiate and manage his public image, a series of problems followed one after another. Negotiations with Paramount broke down, the sofa jumping incident, Faith was attacked by the media, and scandals with actresses frequently appeared in the tabloids. In just over a year, Cruise's public image plummeted, and his acting career suffered a huge blow. In the following few years, Paula Wagner left Cruise's production company in disappointment. After that, except for the Mission Impossible series, Cruise's movies were almost always losing money. Because of this, Cruise couldn't be strong in the Mission Impossible series. The glory of receiving $75 million from a single movie was gone forever. Chapter 307. Hearing Paula Wagner's answer, Eric recalled some information in his mind and quickly said, "Actually, this is not bad. You can let go of a lot of unnecessary things and focus on being a producer. Maybe we can work together in the future." "Work together?" Paula Wagner asked doubtfully. Eric glanced at Cruise, who was standing beside Paula Wagner, who was talking about the movie Thunder Aspirations. He then turned to Paula Wagner and said, "Yeah, I think you're a very capable agent. It just so happens that Firefly is also in a period of rapid expansion. They really need someone like you." Paula Wagner quickly understood the subtext in Eric's words. However, Paula Wagner had just set up her own film company with Cruise, and was now full of ambition. She had no intention of jumping ship. "Mr. Williams, Tommy and I are very happy working together, so please don't mention this again. Of course, I know you won't agree to it now, but things are unpredictable. If you want to change working environment one day, Firefly's door is always open to you." As soon as Eric finished speaking, Cruise's voice rang out. "Hey Eric, I'm still here. You're too much to poach my partner in front of me." Seeing that Cruise didn't seem to care at all, Eric also laughed. "Tommy, any company would be happy to accept an excellent film talent, so you have to keep a close eye on Ms. Wagner. Maybe she will jump ship at any time." Cruise looked at Eric as if looking at an idiot. "How is that possible? Paula won't leave. There's no other Tom Cruise in Hollywood." When Paula Wagner heard Cruise's words, her expression became a little uncomfortable. Cruise's words were a little too self-centered, completely ignoring the help Paula Wagner had given him over the years. Eric keenly caught the flash of embarrassment on the woman's face, and a smug smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. This could be considered as planting a seed. Perhaps in a few years, Paula Wagner could be the producer of the Mission Impossible series again. This woman's ability was beyond doubt. As for the male lead, it wouldn't be Mr. Cruise anyway. Eric pondered and looked at Paula Wagner again. Soon he thought of another woman. Maybe he could also try to poach another woman from Cruise. Pi Kingsley was also a very good agent. Moreover, 2 days ago, Eric happened to hear Nicole complain that her current agent was not very qualified. Eric knew that Nicole said that because she wanted him to go out, but her contract was changed to Kapoor's. However, Kapoor was now in charge of the contracts of several A-level stars, but there could be more. At this time, after listening to Cruise's explanation, Nicole shook her head slightly and said, "Mr. Cruise, I'm sorry, I can't give you an answer right away. I need to think about it." A look of disbelief appeared on Cruise's face as he asked, "Nicole, do you know about Top Gun from a few years ago? Many unknown actors in that movie shot to fame, just like Meg Ryan. If she hadn't shown her face in Top Gun, she would never have had the chance to get the female lead role in When Harry Met Sally. I believe that Thunderbolt Aspirations won't be any worse than that movie. If you're the female lead, your acting career will definitely rise to another level." Nicole glanced at Eric beside her, hoping that he would put in a good word for her. Before Eric could even react, Cruise seemed to have understood something and said, "Nicole, don't tell me you're still thinking of taking on the role of the female lead in Ghost? I think Emily is just a bawling character in the script. She's just a pretty face who doesn't have any room to express herself." Hearing Cruise's words, Paula Wagner had the urge to touch her forehead again. Since her original goal of getting the copyright of Mission Impossible had been ruined by the two men, and coupled with Cruise's current situation, Paula Wagner did not dare to stay any longer. Although it seemed that no matter what Cruise said, Eric did not show any signs of anger, he was after all a hot-blooded young man. In Paula Wagner's opinion, Eric's attitude was no different from those pretentious young men, who pretended to be mature, who knew when he would explode. Therefore, when Cruise began to mercilessly belittle Eric's script again, Paula Wagner quickly interjected, "Tommy, I think we should go. We still have some work to do in the afternoon." Cruise was interrupted by Paula, but he quickly reacted. It was always those actresses who cried and begged to cooperate with him. Since the woman in front of him was not willing to cooperate with him, could he not find a female lead? "Nicole, think about it carefully, but we don't have much time," Cruise said with a smile. Then he snapped his fingers and called the waiter to settle the bill. "I will, Mr. Cruise," Nicole nodded politely. After settling the bill, Cruise and Paula Wagner left directly. Eric was still sitting there, and asked the waiter to serve them a fresh pot of coffee. He then turned to the woman beside him and asked, "How do you feel?" Nicole thought for a moment and said, "Self-righteous and not very smart. He's also a mess when it comes to dealing with people." Eric winked and said, "It's easy to get hold of such a man." If it was before she starred in Sleepless in Seattle, Nicole would definitely have such thoughts. But now she was an A-list actress in Hollywood. Why should she let herself be wronged? Getting along with a self-centered man like Cruise would definitely not be a good experience. She picked up the silver spoon next to her and stirred the coffee in front of her. She supported her chin with one hand and looked at Eric with sparkling eyes. She rarely took the initiative to say, "Actually, I want to get hold of another man." Eric did not expect the woman to suddenly bring up this topic. He said, "Give up early. You won't succeed. I'll always be a hunter, not a prey. Also in Hollywood, there are only women I'm interested in and women I'm not interested in. There's no woman who can get hold of me." Nicole raised her eyebrows and asked, "What kind of woman am I?" Eric said without hesitation, "The kind that doesn't interest you." "Oh." After being speechless for a moment, Nicole asked indignantly, "If you're not interested, why did you keep me when you met the woman in the audition for Dark War?" Eric tilted his head and thought for a moment before saying, "It's fun." Nicole stared at Eric in disbelief. After a moment, the woman suddenly showed a smug smile and said softly, "I understand." Eric did not expect Nicole to have such a reaction. He asked in confusion, "What do you understand?" Nicole said with certainty, "You're jealous. You must be jealous when you saw me talking to Tom Cruise." "Why do you think so?" Eric asked in surprise. "I mean, how can you tell that I'm jealous?" "I can tell from what you just said." Nicole raised her chin and continued, "I know you don't want to admit it, but you must be jealous." Eric smiled and shook his head. "Okay, you can think whatever you want." When Nicole heard Eric's answer, she thought that he had acquiesced. She felt smug for a moment, then came over and asked curiously, "What do you think of the movie Thunder Ambition that Tom Cruise is producing?" "If you want to accept it, then accept it. You don't have to ask for my opinion. You know, a man who's jealous deep down in his heart will definitely not say anything good." Nicole smiled and shook her head. "I won't accept it. The role of the female doctor is completely a vase, and she doesn't have many scenes. Even if this movie can get a high box office, it won't help my image much. Maybe the critics will criticize me for acting as a vase. Then there's nothing to say." Eric finished the coffee in his cup, got up, and walked out. Nicole quickly got up and followed Eric. "Hey, wait for me." The two came to the parking lot together. After Eric started the car, he continued, "By the way, didn't you say 2 days ago that your current agent is not good? Now there's a very good candidate." Nicole was puzzled. "You mean?" Eric also kept her in suspense. He said to Nicole, "Tom Cruise's current agent is called Pi Kingsley. Maybe you can try to get in touch with her. She's a very capable woman." Nicole was a little disappointed. Although Eric had sold UTA to ICM, and Kapoor had become a partner of ICM, the two were still very close. Moreover, Kapoor's ability was also the highest in Hollywood. No matter what the consideration was, Nicole preferred to let Kapoor manage the agency. She originally thought that Eric would say this, but she didn't expect him to recommend an agent that she had never heard of. Eric also saw that Nicole didn't seem to be too satisfied. He had done it on the spur of the moment. At this moment he shrugged and said, "It's up to you whether you want to or not. If you still want Kapoor to be your agent, then you can talk to him personally. As long as he's willing, I have no objections." Okay. I'll try looking for Pi Kingsley," Nicole said. Soon, a mischievous look flashed in her eyes. "However, aren't you worried that something will happen if Tom Cruise and I are under the same agent?" Eric pursed his lips and looked around. Then he slowly stopped the car by the roadside and quickly unfastened the girl's seatbelt. After an unknown period of time, a cry of surprise came from inside the car. Eric glanced at the girl and started the car with a smirk. Then he said, "I'll give you a stamp. Remember, you're mine from now on." Nicole was worried for a while. When she heard Eric's words, she was even angrier. She stretched out her small fist and punched the man's shoulder a few times. "Eric Williams, you scoundrel, bastard." Chapter 308. Here breakfast. Nicole casually placed the tray in front of Eric and walked to the other side of the table. Eric, who had just sat down at the table, looked at the food on the tray and asked, "Where's the milk? Also, like I said, I don't like fried bread." "It's up to you whether you want to eat it or not. Also, I have to go to New York for a few days. I won't be staying here when I come back. You can continue to let the servants prepare breakfast for you," Nicole said angrily as she poked the salad in front of her with her fork. Eric smiled and said, "You're still angry. Yesterday Drew left, and today you're leaving too. Won't I be alone in the villa again?" "Humph, that's none of my business. Anyway, if you wave your hand, there will definitely be women willing to throw themselves at you," Nicole said angrily. Eric touched his nose awkwardly and spread out today's newspaper on the table. He said, "It's all your fault. If you didn't take every opportunity to seduce me, this wouldn't have happened." "I'm not talking to you." Nicole pursed her lips and lowered her head. She ate the breakfast in front of her in big bites. She chewed on the vegetable salad as if she was biting Eric. Nicole always looked calm and steady. Eric had never seen the girl lose her composure before. This was the first time he saw Nicole throw a tantrum. To be honest, she looked quite cute. He got up with a smile and poured himself a glass of milk from the fridge. He pushed it in front of Nicole and said, "Do you want a glass of milk? If you eat salads all the time, your body won't be able to take it. You're in such a good shape. Why are you suddenly on a diet? I still prefer the feeling of meat." Nicole glared at Eric again and poured herself a glass of milk. Eric smiled and drank a few mouthfuls of milk. He ate his breakfast and casually flipped through the newspaper in front of him. After a while, Eric suddenly put down the cutlery in his hand and picked up a newspaper. The photo on the newspaper was clear at a glance. It was the scene when he met Cruise yesterday. The photo was taken through a glass window, and only the backs of Eric and Nicole could be seen. However, the faces of Cruise and Paula Wagner were very clear. Tom Cruise criticized Ghost in front of Williams, and is suspected to have fallen out with him. The famous Hollywood director Eric Williams' new film is in the midst of intense preparations, and the choice of the male and female leads has also become the focus of attention. Yesterday, our reporter discovered that Eric Williams and Tom Cruise met at a famous restaurant on Wilshire Boulevard in Hollywood. He suspected that Eric Williams had invited Tom Cruise to be the male lead in his new movie. However, through the analysis of Tom Cruise's lips, our reporter discovered that the negotiations between the two parties were not going well. Not long after the conversation began, Tom Cruise said that the male lead in Ghost was very stupid, in front of Williams. Afterwards, Tom Cruise didn't talk much with Eric Williams about Ghost. Instead, he had a good chat with Williams' female companion, the Australian actress Nicole Kidman, who had become famous in Sleepless in Seattle. During the conversation, he invited Nicole Kidman to be the female lead in his new movie. He also criticized the female lead in Ghost for not having any room for acting, saying that she was just a crying vase. After Cruise and Paula Wagner parted ways with Williams, Williams and Nicole Kidman sat down and talked for a while. As their backs were facing each other, we didn't know what they were talking about. However, not long after, Williams stood up and left. Nicole Kidman anxiously followed him out of the restaurant. From the looks of it, our Playboy was very dissatisfied with Nicole Kidman's conversation with Tom Cruise. Maybe it was because he didn't want Nicole Kidman to be cast in Cruise's new movie, so he left angrily. Williams and Nicole Kidman might have a rift because of Tom Cruise. Eric helplessly read the newspaper several times and then handed it to Nicole. Look, something happened again. Nicole took the newspaper in front of her and read it once. Then she curled her lips. The newspaper is right. There is a rift between us. Nicole, you look very cute when you're angry. If you don't believe me, you can look at yourself in the mirror. Umph. The girl coldly snorted and ignored Eric's teasing. She continued to eat her breakfast. Eric wasn't in the mood to eat breakfast. Although he didn't care about falling out with Cruise, he couldn't help but pay attention to Cruise's comments on Ghost in the newspaper. If they didn't make a clarification and counterattack as soon as possible, if the media turned their attention to the content of Ghost and spouted nonsense, it might create preconceived notions among the public and cause Ghost to be known as a bad film before it even started filming. Eric picked up the newspaper and went to the living room. He called Kapoor and discussed with him. Kapoor said that he would contact Cruise as soon as possible to make a statement. There was no comment about Eric and Nicole in the newspaper. It meant that the tabloid paparazzi only knew part of their conversation by lip reading and didn't record it. This made Eric feel relieved. Otherwise, after Cruise and Paula Wagner left, the content of Eric and Nicole's conversation would be even more explosive and would definitely be exposed. After hanging up the phone, Eric returned to the dining room again. He looked at Nicole, who was still eating her breakfast slowly, and said with emotion, "The tabloid paparazzi can read lips. It seems that I have to be more careful with what I say in the future. Even if there's no one around, I can't speak carelessly." Nicole rolled her eyes at Eric and ignored him. Eric continued to eat breakfast and read the newspaper. However, this meal was destined not to be so peaceful. Eric soon saw the image of a man and a woman walking side by side in another newspaper. The man had an attentive look on his face, and the woman had a faint smile on her face. Eric shook his head, picked up the newspaper, got up, and went to the living room again. He made a phone call and gave some instructions. Finally, he returned to the dining room and finished his breakfast. After breakfast, Eric drove Nicole to the airport, and then drove to the headquarters of Firefly. When he arrived at the company, it was almost 10 o'clock. However, he was just in time for the meeting with Robert Shea. Because of the box office success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it was inevitable that Robert Shea's mood was a little strange these days. Almost everyone who came into contact with Robert Shea noticed this. Robert Shea's temper had also become very irritable these days. This situation was actually very easy to understand. When Firefly bought the new line, the market value of the new line was only $150 million. Robert Shea took advantage of Eric's difficulties and barely managed to extort 10% of the shares from Eric, increasing his total share of Firefly's shares to 25%. But then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was released. The movie earned more than $30 million in the box office in the first week. Robert Shea couldn't help but feel disappointed before he was overjoyed. This was because if he had insisted on not selling the new line back then, the current success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would have been solely enjoyed by the new line. Based on the current trend of the box office, the movie would have no problem grossing more than $100 million. In the overseas market, the videotape market, and the surrounding market, it would be easy for the movie to earn hundreds of millions of USD in profits. In addition, the movie could be developed into a sequel. Therefore, the market value of the new line could at least double with the distribution rights of this movie. If only I hadn't sold it back then. Robert Shea had secretly regretted not selling it more than once these days, but it was all to no avail. In a small conference room at Firefly, the four people sat around a small conference table. Robert Shea introduced the two people beside him to Eric and said, "Eric, these two are Ronald Bass and Nancy Price. They are the screenwriter and the author of the original novel. This is the script. You can take a look at it first. Eric nodded and took the script. He looked at the title on the cover and raised his eyebrows slightly. It said Sleeping with the Enemy. In his memory, this was a movie starring Julia. It seemed to be doing very well at the box office. Eric, is there a problem? Robert Shea saw Eric's strange expression and thought that Eric was a little dissatisfied with the script. However, this time, with the success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Robert Shea's confidence was greatly boosted. He even felt that even if he failed once, so what? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had already made a lot of money for Firefly. This money should have been his own. Therefore, Robert Shea made up his mind that no matter how much Eric objected, he would not make any compromises. Deep in his heart, Robert Shea even had the urge to fiercely argue with Eric. Hearing Robert Shea's words, Eric shook his head and said, "It's nothing." With that said, Eric opened the script and quickly flipped through the pages. After more than 10 minutes, Eric finished reading the script. He looked up at Robert Shea and said, "Robert, are you sure you want to make this movie?" Robert Shea nodded with certainty. "Eric, you said before that you won't interfere with my choice of script. As long as I choose, you will sign it." Eric could hear the unwillingness in Robert Shea's voice. Of course he understood why. He chuckled and said, "Of course I'll keep my word. The script for this thriller is not bad. By the way, do you have an actor in mind?" Robert Shea had originally planned to argue with Eric. Seeing that Eric did not raise any objections this time, he could not vent the inexplicable anger that he had accumulated. He suddenly became a little awkward and silent. After a while, Robert Shea said, "Yes, this is also the reason why I brought Ronald Bass and Nancy Price here today." "Ronald, you say it." Ronald Bass, who had been sitting beside Robert Shea, said, "Mr. Williams, it's like this. After the script was written, Nancy and I agreed that Julia Roberts was the most suitable female lead in this movie. However, we had previously sent an invitation, but Julia Roberts' agent quickly rejected it. Mr. Shea said that perhaps you could help." "Robert, what do you think?" Eric looked at Robert Shea again. Robert Shea nodded and said, "I also think that Julia Roberts is very suitable to be the female lead of this movie. I even personally called Kapoor Sid. However, Kapoor said that Julia doesn't like the script, so she doesn't want to act. I think that with your relationship with Julia, you should be able to help persuade her." Eric rubbed the script and pondered for a while, then nodded and said, "Okay, I'll try." "Eric, everyone knows about your relationship with Julia. Moreover, you were the one who persuaded Julia to act in Steel Magnolias. So please give me an accurate answer, okay?" Robert Shea continued. Eric stared at Robert Shea for a while, then nodded and said, "Okay, I promise that Julia will act in it, but you need to talk to Kapoor personally about the salary. Now that UTA is gone, Kapoor and I are just good friends, so it's impossible for Julia to make concessions on the salary with just a few words from me." "This is not a problem at all," Robert Shea said. "By the way, I have a preliminary estimate for this movie. The budget is about $30 million US. I also plan to find an A-level star to act as the male lead." Eric thought about the script he had just read and recalled the movies in his mind. He knew that this movie would definitely not cost $30 million US. Looking at Robert Shea, who was eager to argue with him, Eric sighed helplessly and said, "Okay, $30 million US it is." Robert Shea had nowhere to vent his pent-up anger again. He picked up the cup in front of him and drank a few mouthfuls of coffee in frustration. He did not know why, but he had mustered up all his energy today to argue with Eric or something else. But until now, Eric had not given him any chance. This was very different from Eric's usual personality. Robert Shea did not know what the problem was. Eric looked at Robert Shea with a faint smile on his face. His fingers jumped a few times on the script in front of him. He had already made up his mind. Even if Robert Shea chose a bad script, he would accept it and pay a sum of money to make Robert Shea realize the reality. It would be very cost-effective for Robert Shea to give up the idea of producing the movie himself and just focus on distributing it. And now, the script that Robert Shea chose was not a bad one, but a movie that could sell well. Therefore, he would not object. Ronald, Nancy, go to my office and wait for a while. I have something to discuss with Eric. I will talk to you about the movie later. Okay, Mr. Shea. Ronald and Nancy were also experienced people. They realized that the atmosphere between the two of them was not very harmonious, so they quickly left the office. Eric, regarding the overseas distribution of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think it's best to let Disney distribute it. Michael Eisner offered a very high cut. If we do it ourselves according to your previous plan, I think we will earn at least $10 million less, Robert Shea said after the two of them left. Michael Eisner contacted you? Eric asked in surprise. Of course. Robert Shea seemed to feel that he had finally caught the dissatisfaction in Eric's tone. He immediately said, Eric, I know that Michael Eisner did target you some time ago, but it's all in the past. Moreover, you've already accepted the script for Ghost. So, I think it's time to put an end to this matter. Also, I contacted Michael Eisner for the benefit of Firefly. I have no selfish motives. If you like this work, you are welcome to come and vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Mobile users, please read it at M. Chapter 309. Eric listened to Robert Shea's explanation without batting an eyelid. He tried his best to hide his sneer on the spot. Robert Shea said that he had no selfish motives, but on the surface, he looked open and aboveboard. However, Eric was certain that Michael Eisner had definitely discussed with Robert Shea before. There was no doubt that Michael Eisner had promised him some benefits. Otherwise, Robert Shea would not have betrayed him so obviously, and wanted to give the overseas distribution rights of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Disney. With the success of a series of movies, Eric was no longer the young boy who had just entered Hollywood a year ago. His ambition was getting bigger and bigger. Moreover, Eric had told more than one person that his goal was the entire Hollywood. Under such circumstances, it was inevitable to recruit talents for his own use. He did not mind giving power to these people who could help him rise quickly. This was also one of the reasons why Eric was more patient with Robert Shea. Even during the storm some time ago, when Robert Shea clearly took advantage of the situation and took away 10% of Firefly's shares, Eric endured it. At that time, Firefly's 5 movies at the end of the year had been very successful. Firefly had the rights to 5 more blockbuster movies. The 10% shares were far more than a mere $60 million could get. However, as long as Robert Shea could take care of Firefly wholeheartedly, Eric felt that the price was nothing. Now that New Line and Firefly had completely merged, when the profits of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were distributed at the end of the year, according to the proportion of each person's shares, Eric would take more than 70% of the profits. Robert Shea, the biggest contributor, could only get 25% of the dividends. Under such circumstances, it was understandable that Robert Shea was upset. Therefore, when Robert Shea played some tricks on sleeping with the enemy, Eric just let it be. However, now that he heard that Robert Shea wanted to give the overseas distribution rights of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Disney, Eric was completely disappointed with Robert Shea. It was not that he did not tell Robert Shea about his plans for Firefly. Although it had merged with New Line, Firefly's distribution ability was still relatively weak. Take Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for example. Because of Eric's affirmation, Firefly took out 2,000 TV screens in one go. However, that was also Firefly's limit. Because of the release of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original small production left behind by New Line had to be pushed back because Firefly could no longer afford any theatrical resources. In contrast, any of the 7 major film companies, if necessary, could raise more than 5,000 screens to support the release of 2 or 3 big-budget films at the same time. Of course, ordinary film companies would not do so, because it would only form vicious competition. From the very beginning, Eric had planned to use the next few years to expand the domestic and overseas market with the advantage of Firefly's outstanding blockbuster movies. As long as they could establish a complete distribution channel, it didn't matter even if they earned less for a while. This was because a complete and powerful distribution channel was the foundation of a large film company's survival. After all, everyone knew that relying on the distribution channels of other film companies was not a long-term solution. Now, just because of the accidental success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Robert Shay's mentality was unbalanced to such an extent. As Firefly developed and grew stronger, the internal turmoil of Firefly in the future was almost inevitable. Firefly was the most important cornerstone for Eric to enter Hollywood. He would never allow this to happen. Then there was only one solution, and that was to get rid of Robert Shay. Although he had already made up his mind, Eric also knew that now was not a good time to do this. New Line and Firefly had just completed the integration. Now, most of the people in charge of the various departments were still Robert Shay's direct subordinates. If Robert Shay was immediately kicked out of the company, it was hard to say whether these people would leave with Robert Shay under the influence of other forces. Once that happened, the distribution channels of New Line integrated by Firefly would soon be paralyzed. This was what Eric did not want to see in any case. "Eric, are you listening to me?" Robert Shay saw Eric's distracted look and gently knocked on the table with a dissatisfied look on his face. "Oh, by the way, where were we just now?" Eric looked up and asked calmly. "I'm saying, how about handing over the overseas distribution of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Disney? I had someone calculate. According to the share Michael Eisner gave us, we can earn at least $10 million. Eric shook his head. "Robert, I don't agree." "Why?" Robert Shay raised his voice. Eric said, "Robert, have you ever thought about why Michael Eisner gave us such good conditions? This is a win-win situation," Robert Shay said after hesitating for a while. Eric immediately shook his head. "No, Robert. According to Firefly's current overseas distribution ability, perhaps if we distribute it ourselves, the overseas box office sales may only be 60% or even lower than when the 7 major distributors released it. However, I've talked to you before. Although we'll earn less, we can use this to open up channels and form a distribution network overseas. If we follow Michael Eisner's suggestion, we may be able to earn more money temporarily, but we'll never be able to form our own distribution network." "Eric, don't you think that the price is a bit high? If we want to expand our distribution network, I think we can use low-cost small productions to expand. That way we won't lose too much money." As for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's too much of a waste to use it to expand our distribution channels. Eric placed his right hand on the conference table in front of him and pressed it down slightly, as if he was suppressing something in his heart. But very quickly he sighed softly and continued. "Robert, if a low-cost small production can't sell well, we won't be able to make much money overseas. If we can't make money, those overseas distributors aren't doing charity work. Why would they help to distribute it? It's not like you don't know that most of the Hollywood movies with box office sales below $50 million are basically bought out directly by overseas distributors. Even the 7 major film companies themselves can't be bothered to do global distribution." "Eric." Robert Shay stared into Eric's eyes and said seriously, "Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is my movie. I hope that it can maximize its profits. I think that Firefly's most important task now is to make money. As long as we have money, I believe that expanding our distribution channels will be a piece of cake." Chapter 310. After Robert Shay said this, the two of them fell into a short silence. They stared at each other without giving in. After a while, Eric first avoided Robert Shay's gaze. A victorious smile appeared on Robert Shay's face. "All right, Robert, if you insist." Eric's voice was slightly hoarse and his tone had become lower. When Robert Shay heard Eric say this, he let out what he thought was a hearty laugh. He stretched out his hand slightly, as if he wanted to pat Eric on the shoulder. However, there was a conference table between the two of them. Robert Shay's action was obviously not going to succeed. "Eric, don't be like this. You have to believe me. In Hollywood, money is the most important thing. Without money, everything is just empty talk. Distribution channels can't be built in a day or two. Look at the other film companies now. Which one of them doesn't have decades of history?" After Robert Shay finished speaking, Eric nodded slightly. It was unknown whether it was acknowledgement or something else. "By the way, Robert, Jeffrey told me that you weren't optimistic about the Basic Instinct project?" Robert Shay was stunned for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, Eric, I think Eric was not in the mood to listen to Robert Shea's reason. When he heard Robert Shea say this, he directly said, "In that case, cancel this project." Robert Shea opened his mouth. "What, cancel? But hasn't Jeffrey already started casting? I mean, cancel it from the company's production plan this year." Eric looked up. "If this movie is produced, there will indeed be a lot of trouble in the rating. So, to avoid risks, I intend to pull in investments from the Big Seven. In addition, I will personally invest a portion and set up a separate shell company to operate it." Robert Shea had been in Hollywood for 20 years. How could he not understand what Eric meant? He was indeed not optimistic about the script of Basic Instinct, but he did not oppose it too firmly. Now, what Eric did was equivalent to taking the production of the movie out of Firefly's hands. Then if the movie was successful in the future, whether it was the copyright or the income, it would have nothing to do with Firefly. In other words, it would have nothing to do with him. How could Robert Shea not understand that this was Eric's counterattack to his actions just now? He had been willful just now, and as a major shareholder, Eric had the right to be willful. After a moment of hesitation, Robert Shea said, "Eric, although I don't think highly of it, I actually don't object. According to the current plan, we will release Sleeping with the Enemy, that you're in charge of, The Silence of the Lambs from TG Film Company, and part of Ghost during the summer. We will co-distribute them with Disney. I think that Firefly won't have enough resources to distribute Basic Instinct, so it's not a bad choice to do this project alone. It can also avoid risks." Robert Shea pondered for a while before he clenched his teeth. He did not believe that Eric would continue to be successful. Therefore, Robert Shea quickly nodded and said, "Okay, Eric, we'll do as you say." In fact, even if Robert Shea did not agree, Eric still planned to do this. In his previous life, the box office of Basic Instinct was only a little over $100 million US. Whether it was reputation or box office, it could not be compared to Ghost or The Silence of the Lambs. It might not even be as good as Sleeping with the Enemy. However, since Robert Shea insisted on handing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Disney, Eric had to make a certain response to make Robert Shea hesitate. Otherwise, Eric was certain that Robert Shea would continue to push his luck. "Then I'll go back to work." When Eric heard Robert Shea's response, he nodded, stood up, and left the conference room. After Robert Shea waited for Eric to leave, he smirked and finished the coffee in front of him before he slowly stood up and left. On the Santa Monica Mountain north of Malibu, in a forest, dozens of people were nervously working. There were all kinds of filming equipment everywhere. This was the set of The X-Files. Although the story of The X-Files took place in various states in the United States, it was impossible to travel around during filming. Instead, they shot around Los Angeles or set up a set in a studio. Only when it was unavoidable would they go to the corresponding state to take some outdoor scenes, and then edit them. Muller and Scarlett were driving a black Ford sedan on a small road between the trees. Muller and Scarlett were chatting leisurely when the radio in the car suddenly became chaotic amidst a strange buzzing sound. Muller quickly stopped the car. "Cut, this scene is over." Raymond quickly removed the camera from the car. "Brad, Fahmy, you guys can rest for a while." Director Kim Monis held a loudspeaker in his hand and shouted to everyone. The crew quickly got busy. Brad Pitt and Fahmy Jensen also heard the director's words and got out of the car while talking and laughing. Brad Pitt took a bottle of water from the logistics department and politely handed it to Fahmy Jensen. The girl smiled and thanked him before taking it. "Hey Fahmy, it's time to get off work in 2 hours. How about going to the bar tonight?" Brad Pitt saw that the girl was in a good mood and invited her in a timely manner. Fahmy Jensen hesitated for a moment. Although he had a good impression of Brad Pitt over the past few days, to the point that paparazzi had taken pictures of the two of them and published them in the newspapers when they were strolling together, Brad Pitt didn't have a good impression of him. However, another figure kept flashing through the girl's mind. She knew very well how she got the role of the female lead. Back then, that little man had given the role to her, a newcomer with no acting experience, among a large number of strong competitors. In fact, the meaning was very obvious. He had taken a fancy to her. The girl knew that she had signed the acting contract, which meant that she had tacitly agreed to something. She originally thought that Eric Williams would quickly invite her, but not long after she got the role, Eric Williams was embroiled in a storm, and there was no follow-up. In addition, Brad Pitt tirelessly courted her. Famke Janssen felt that she got along well with this man. Brad Pitt was gentle, considerate, and very good at coaxing women. Famke Janssen slowly began to be moved. Maybe he has already forgotten about me, the girl thought. He hadn't done anything for a few months. In addition, he was obviously a playboy. How could a playboy lack women around him? She might just be an inconspicuous passerby by his side. Beautiful women were inevitably proud. Therefore, these thoughts inevitably made the girl feel a little depressed. She was even more upset than when she had signed the acting contract for the role. I think, maybe okay. Famke Janssen thought for a moment and nodded slightly. Brad Pitt's smile became even brighter. By the way, do you have a bar that you often go to? Famke Janssen shook her head. Sorry, I used to live in New York. You can just pick one. No problem. Pitt nodded. Just as the two of them were about to continue talking, a car drove directly into the set. One of the producers of The X-Files, Hans Whittle, got out of the car and looked around. When he saw the two of them gathered together, he walked over with a slight frown. Hi Hans. Why are you here? Before Hans Whittle walked up to them, director Kim Manners came up to him. Hans Whittle smiled and shook hands with Kim Manners. He pointed at Brad Pitt and Famke Janssen. I'm looking for them. What's the matter? Kim Manners asked. Hans Whittle shrugged helplessly. Mr. Williams is looking for them. Mr. Williams? Kim Manners was stunned, but she quickly reacted. The only person who could be addressed by Hans Whittle in such a manner was Eric Williams. What's the matter? Hans Whittle stuffed a newspaper into King Manas's hands. Read it yourself. At this time, Brad Pitt and Famke Janssen also walked over. When they saw the newspaper that Hans Whittle had stuffed into Kim Manners' hands, they were stunned. It was clearly a photo of the two of them. Brad Pitt knew very well that Hans Whittle was a producer for Firefly. He immediately had a bad feeling. He couldn't be that unlucky, right? He still hadn't forgotten how he had been chased out of a TV set in New York because he had struck up a conversation with the female lead of a TV series. Although he hated Eric very much at the time, as the matter slowly passed, Eric became more and more dazzling, and he became more and more insignificant. A person would be envious and jealous of those who were 1 or 2 steps ahead of them, but for those who were far ahead of them, they usually wouldn't have such feelings. Although Eric was much younger than him, Brad Pitt didn't have much negative feelings towards Eric. Instead, he was more in awe of him. When the set was first established, he was worried that Famke Janssen might be Eric's woman, so he didn't think much of it at first. But as time passed, Brad Pitt realized that Famke Janssen and Eric didn't seem to have any relationship, so he was relieved to pursue her. But now he realized that he had miscalculated again. Glancing at Famke Janssen beside him, Brad Pitt really wanted to slap himself. This woman had no acting experience before. Who would believe that she was picked out from a large group of auditionees because of luck? Since it wasn't luck, there must be other reasons. And the male and female leads of The X-Files were personally decided by Eric Williams, so this other reason couldn't be more obvious. Kim Manus looked at the newspaper, where Brad Pitt and Famke Janssen were walking side by side, and the article's content was about the love sparks between the male and female leads of The X-Files. He asked curiously, Hans, what's the meaning of this? Hans Whittle leaned close to King Manus and whispered a few words into his ear. King Manus looked at the man and woman in front of him and immediately said, Hans, I think there must be some misunderstanding. I thought this article was for the promotion of the movie. Brad Pitt couldn't hold it in any longer and added, Mr. Hans, this is really just a misunderstanding. I have absolutely nothing to do with Miss Famke Janssen. When Famke Janssen heard Brad Pitt's words, her eyes widened in surprise as she looked at the man beside her. Brad Pitt looked at the woman who was looking at him with a guilty conscience, but he quickly said, Miss Janssen, we just happened to meet yesterday. After chatting for a while, we parted ways. Nothing happened between us, right? Famke Janssen finally reacted. She didn't know what had happened to Brad Pitt in New York. Therefore, when she saw the man deny it without hesitation, as if the things he had done to her before were all an illusion, her good impression of him immediately disappeared. Yes, Mr. Hans. I have nothing to do with Mr. Pitt. The rumors in the newspaper were all made up by the paparazzi, Fami Jensen said coldly. While Pitt felt relieved, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. However, he quickly adjusted his mentality. As long as he could keep his position as the male lead, when he became famous in the future, he could get any woman he wanted. He learned from his agent that Fox attached as much importance to the X-Files as to Friends. Whenever he fantasized about his future as the six-man team in Friends, Brad Pitt felt that his years in Hollywood had not been in vain. Everything he had done was worth it. Hans Whittle glanced at the two of them expressionlessly, then set his eyes on Fami Jensen. He said meaningfully, "Mr. Williams wants to see you. You can say this to him in person." When director Kim Manus saw this, he was both unhappy and unwilling to give up. He asked, "Hans, is it now? Is the next scene ready? Why can't we finish the next scene?" Hans Whittle patted Kim Manus on the shoulder. "I'm sorry, Kim. We might have to stop here today. It will take more than an hour to drive from here to Firefly's headquarters. Mr. Williams told me to take them there before I get off work." Although Kim Manus was a little helpless, seeing Hans Whittle's unquestionable gaze, he had no choice but to compromise. He said, "All right, I'll let the crew shoot the other scenes first." Chapter 311. Brad Pitt and Fami Jensen got into Hans Whittle's car together. Although they sat in the back, both of them leaned against the door as if they didn't want to have any contact with each other. "Mr. Hans, may I use your mobile phone?" Pitt thought for a moment, and felt that it was better to inform his agent about this matter. Hans Whittle handed over the large brick beside him. Pitt thanked him, then called his agent Sherry Sakoti. He explained the matter in front of Fami Jensen and Hans Whittle before hanging up. Seeing the undisguised contempt on Fami Jensen's face, Pitt really wanted to curse to her face. "What right does a B*TCH like you who relied on men have to look down on me?" More than an hour later, the three of them arrived at Firefly's headquarters. Brad Pitt's agent, Sherry Sakoti, was already waiting outside. Hans Whittle said something to the receptionist, then led the three of them upstairs to Eric's office. "Mr. Williams is currently auditioning actors. You'll have to wait for a while. I have something to do, so I'll head back first." As Hans Whittle spoke, he gave instructions to the secretary who served them coffee and quickly left. Eric only instructed Brad Pitt and Fami Jensen to meet him. Hans Whittle wasn't willing to listen in on such matters. After Hans Whittle and the secretary left, Sherry Sakoti and Brad Pitt, who were sitting on a large sofa, whispered to each other before looking at Fami Jensen. "Miss Jensen, can you do me a favor?" Fami Jensen was originally flipping through a magazine on the coffee table in boredom. She wasn't as worried as Pitt. After all, compared to Brad Pitt, who had been in Hollywood for 7 or 8 years, she was still a newcomer. No matter what profession they were in, before encountering countless setbacks, newcomers would always feel that they definitely had many, many opportunities. If they failed, they would just have to start all over again. Upon hearing Sherry Sakoti's words, Fami Jensen looked up and looked at the petite but elegant woman, but he didn't say a word. "It's like this, Miss Johnson. You and Brad really have nothing to do with each other, right? Then wait a moment, can you? Don't worry. We have nothing to do with each other to begin with. You don't have to worry about me spouting nonsense," Fami Jensen said coldly before lowering his head. Sherry Sakoti was a little embarrassed, but she continued to explain, "Miss Johnson, Brad isn't like you. It wasn't easy for him to get the opportunity to be the male lead this time." The woman tightened her grip on the magazine, but didn't say anything. Everyone fell silent. "Thank you for your audition, Mr. Brosnan. We'll let you know the results as soon as possible," the assistant said to a handsome man in his 30s in a spacious audition room. After the man left, the two assistant directors beside Eric came over and asked, "Mr. Williams, how did it go?" "Still no good." Eric shook his head and crossed out Pierce Brosnan's name. This 007 actor had left a deep impression on him. After all, he had acted in 4 007 movies in a row, and they were all very late. It was impossible not to remember him. Although the actor's acting skills were good and his image was very suitable for a bank manager, Eric couldn't associate him with Sam, the male lead of Ghost. If that's the case, our audition today will be for naught, one of the assistant directors complained with a smile. No rush, take your time. Eric closed the folder in front of him and instructed his assistant to put it away for him. Then he said to everyone, let's continue tomorrow. I still have some things to do, so I'll leave first. After leaving the audition room, Eric took the elevator to his office. He pushed the door open and saw 3 people sitting in his office in 2 distinct groups. When they saw him come in, the 3 people in the office quickly stood up and greeted him. It's okay, have a seat. Eric waved his hand. When he saw Sharisa Cody, he smiled and said, Miss Cody, why are you here? Sharisa Cody smiled and said, I happen to be free. Eric nodded and walked to his desk. He took out a newspaper and sat down on another sofa in the lounge area. He spread the newspaper on the coffee table in front of him. It's like this, As soon as Eric opened his mouth, Brad Pitt anxiously blurted out again, Mr. Williams, this is really a misunderstanding. I have nothing to do with Miss Johnson. Eric frowned slightly. What? It's like this, Mr. Williams. Although Sharisa Cody blamed Brad Pitt for losing his cool, she still answered Eric's question and said, Yesterday, when the X-Files was filming in Santa Monica, Brad and Ms. Johnson happened to arrive at the filming location together. After parking the car, the 2 of them walked to the set together. This photo was secretly taken by the paparazzi at that time. It's actually a misunderstanding. They have nothing to do with each other. Eric looked at Brad Pitt and Sharisa Cody, who were eager to clarify, then turned to Famek Johnson. When the girl saw Eric looking at her, she nodded reluctantly and said, Yes, I have nothing to do with Mr. Pitt. It's just a coincidence. Eric closed the newspaper, shrugged and said, Well, it seems like there's no need to continue the discussion. Ms. Cody, Mr. Pitt, you can leave now. Brad Pitt and Sharisa Cody were delighted, knowing that Eric didn't plan on pursuing the matter. After thanking him, they quickly pushed open the door and left. After the 2 left, Eric walked to the coffee machine and poured 2 more cups of coffee. He returned to the sofa and handed a cup to Famek Johnson. The girl took a sip and looked up to quickly glance at Eric before saying softly, What are you going to do with me? What? Eric was exhausted from the day and had just leaned back on the sofa, so he didn't hear the girl's voice clearly. Humph. Famek Johnson snorted with a hint of desperation. I mean, what are you going to do with me? Did something happen to you? Eric asked curiously when he heard the dispirited tone in the girl's voice. It's all your fault, bastard. The girl mumbled, but she didn't say the last word. Eric smiled, squinted his eyes, and exhaled as he leaned back on the sofa. Can you help me rub my temples? It's been a tiring day, and my head hurts a little. Moments later, a pair of cold, slender fingers gently pressed down. Eric's nose was filled with a fragrance that was different from other women's. It was faint and very pleasant. If I were to say that I saw the news in the newspaper this morning, and only called you here to tell you to keep a low profile, you definitely wouldn't believe me, right? Eric suddenly said after a while. The fingers that were moving paused for a moment before they quickly began rubbing again. Heh, you definitely wouldn't believe it. Even I don't believe it myself, but it's true. In the settings of this television series, the male and female leads won't be together until the end of the series. They will always maintain an ambiguous relationship, and it's also a way to maintain the ratings. If the 2 of you are together in real life, then it'll seem fake to maintain an ambiguous relationship in the television series. That's why I want you to keep a low profile, and try not to be discovered by the paparazzi. The girl still didn't say anything, but the fingers that were massaging Eric became much gentler. Eric continued, as if he was muttering to himself. This morning, I almost quarreled with my partner. He felt that he didn't get enough, so he wanted more. He always wants more. Humans are greedy, and that's nothing. However, if he wants more, then he has to show the corresponding strength. How can he have that strength? Jenny left me some time ago. She was my first woman. She chose to leave because of that storm, those stupid things. Actually, it wasn't wrong, but I always wanted to get her back. Even if I had to build an ancient castle on the edge of a cliff like the villain in the story, lock her inside, and raise her like a princess. My princess alone. I built a house by the sea. I wanted to face the sea and let the spring flowers bloom. Then one by one they all left. In the end, I found that I was the only one facing the sea. The house was too big, and it was very empty. I wanted too much, but I couldn't catch any of them. In the end, they all ran away. I couldn't be bothered to catch them. They always ran away anyway. Originally, I was really interested in you. Your legs are very long, and I like long-legged beauties. That's because you're too soft-hearted. For some reason, the girl couldn't help but interject even though she blushed slightly when she heard the latter half of Eric's sentence. Eric was stunned for a moment, then he smiled. Yes, I'm too soft-hearted. A bunch of little girls. They all need to be taught a lesson. The girl choked. Okay, I take back what I just said. Eric grabbed one of the girl's small hands and pulled Famke Jensen into his arms. The girl obediently let the man do as he pleased, gently pressing her face against Eric's body. Have you seen Smell a Woman? I wrote that script. After hesitating for a moment, the girl still denied it. I haven't seen it. I'll find time to watch it. Actually, I can distinguish the body fragrance of every woman I've been intimate with. Now, I've remembered yours. The girl mocked. That doesn't sound like a good thing, right? It does seem like it's a bad thing. Eric laughed self-deprecatingly. How can it be a good thing that I've taken a liking to? It's very difficult for them to escape. Look, since it's already like this, don't run away. I still have to try. Who knows, I might be able to escape. I won't be satisfied if I don't try. Besides, what kind of man wants to possess so many women? At least, it's not possible in this day and age, right? No, you're wrong. It's completely possible, Eric said. The two chatted endlessly. Unknowingly, time slowly floated by, and Eric fell asleep with the woman in his arms. When he woke up again, it was completely dark outside. He was covered with a woman's jacket. Eric put the jacket aside and stretched. Feeling a light behind him, Eric turned around and saw Famke Jensen sitting behind his desk, quietly reading a magazine with his head lowered. Noticing the movement in front of her, the girl looked up. You're awake? Yeah. Eric stood up and stretched his neck, that was a little uncomfortable from sleeping on the sofa. He asked, what time is it? The girl looked at her watch against the desk lamp. 7:20. You've only slept for 2 hours. The company's security knocked on the door just now. I told them that you had something to do, so they left. Oh, why didn't you leave? Eric asked casually. The girl raised her beautiful eyebrows. Do you want me to go back? Okay, pretend I didn't ask. Eric shrugged. Then, do you have any plans for tonight? If you didn't call us over, I would have already agreed to go clubbing with Brad Pitt tonight. If it was good, maybe something would have happened. But it's definitely impossible now. So if there's nothing else, maybe I'll go home, wash up, and sleep. When I wake up tomorrow, I'll dress up nicely for the shoot. You didn't have a boyfriend before? Eric asked curiously. Please, I'm already 25 years old. How can I not have a boyfriend? The girl said helplessly. He's a photographer, but when we came to Los Angeles, we broke up. Oh. Eric nodded and continued. Then what's next? The girl blinked quickly a few times. Seeing the smile on Eric's face turn evil, she had an inexplicable expectation in her heart. What do you think? Eric thought for a moment, then walked around the desk to the girl and said, Then maybe we can, seeing Eric's actions. Famke Jensen thought that the man wanted to do something here, and his neck shrunk reflexively. But the girl clearly misunderstood Eric's intentions. The man came to her side, pulled out a small drawer behind the desk, and took out a stack of things. It looked like they were invitations. Then let's go to the party. I often get invitations, but I've never been. These were all sent by my assistant. Let me see if there's anything for today. Seeing Eric looking down at the invitations one by one, the girl relaxed in disappointment and said, But the clothes I'm wearing aren't suitable for a party, right? Eric looked up. The girl was wearing a light gray shirt, loose trousers, and shiny leather boots that looked like men's. The last time I saw you, you weren't wearing these, right? These are costumes, okay? Big boss, you gave the order, and we didn't even have time to change before we were dragged here. The girl complained unhappily. Oh, I remember now. I think the set photos were like this. Okay, it's my fault for calling you here in such a hurry. I'll give you a dress later, Eric said casually as he lowered his head and continued searching. The girl opened her mouth wanting to refuse, but in the end she didn't say anything. After all, this man wasn't short on money. By the way, where are the parties held? I live in Burbank now. It's too late, I'm afraid. The girl's voice became softer as she spoke. She probably couldn't escape tonight. She didn't seem to want to escape either, or she would have left earlier. Beverly Hills. It's usually there. You know, most of the celebrities live there, Eric said. He finally found one. How about this? It's from Coppola's house. It happens to be tonight. Francis Coppola? Eric nodded. Yes, the one who filmed the Godfather series. I'm also curious as to why I received an invitation from them. Oh, I think Alan specifically reminded me this morning, but I didn't take it to heart. I've never been to such an invitation before. So, I'm the first one. The girl raised her eyebrows. Eric smiled. Yes, you're the first one. Chapter 312. In a brightly lit manor in Beverly Hills, a party to celebrate the opening of The Godfather 3 was being held. Beside the swimming pool outside the villa, a middle-aged man in his 40s, who was slightly bald, was gesticulating to the black-haired girl beside him. Back then, I served as Mr. Coppola's assistant for 2 consecutive productions of The Godfather. My position was equivalent to that of an assistant director. You know, I was only in my early 30s at that time. It's not easy to become an assistant director at the age of 30 in Hollywood. In the following years, I kept in touch with Mr. Coppola. Mr. Coppola introduced me as an investor for this movie. He was very optimistic about my script. So, Miss Connolly, as long as you can act well, I promise you that this time, you will make a successful transition. Although Jennifer Connolly was a little impatient, she didn't dare to show it. Ever since she lost the role of the Encounter girl in Dark War last year, her agent, Jim Lester, no longer focused on her. Because of this, she hadn't gotten any roles for a year. If this continued, she might be completely forgotten by Hollywood. Every time she thought of this possibility, she felt a strong sense of uneasiness. What else could she do after leaving Hollywood? She knew nothing except acting. She would find a man to marry and be a full-time housewife. Although she could accept this choice, she didn't want to live a boring life of caring about daily necessities. Even if she got married, she wanted to live a little more affluent. But among the people she knew, only people in their 40s or 50s who could give her such a life were people with certain qualifications and status in Hollywood. Not to mention that these people were usually the same age as her father, but in Hollywood, these people's marriages were the most unreliable. She might be dumped at any time. At that time, she would be old and no longer beautiful. What would she do? Hey, Miss Connolly, are you listening to me? She was just distracted for a moment, but soon heard a slightly unhappy voice in her ear. She quickly pulled herself together and smiled. Sorry, Mr. Brandt. Tony Brandt was very satisfied with the girl's attitude and said, Miss Connolly, it's very rude to be absent-minded on such a grand occasion. Those big shots won't be as generous as me. Oh, Mr. Coppola is here. And Al Pacino, that seems to be his nephew Nicolas Cage. Jennifer Connolly also saw a few people walking out of the villa, talking and laughing. The bearded man with glasses in the middle was obviously Francis Coppola. The people who were chatting in the courtyard all gathered to greet each other. Miss Connolly, let's go up and say hello, Tony Brandt said, raising his arm slightly. Jennifer Connolly hesitated for a moment, but still took the man's arm and walked towards Francis Coppola and the others. After arriving near Francis Coppola and waiting for the previous group of people to leave, Tony Brandt hurriedly let go of Jennifer Connolly and walked towards Coppola and the others with a fawning smile. Mr. Coppola, congratulations on being able to direct the finale of the Godfather series. I believe this movie will definitely cause a sensation again. Thank you, Tony. How's your movie going? Francis Coppola shook hands with Tony Brandt and asked casually. It's almost ready to start shooting. Oh, this is the female lead I chose, Miss Jennifer Connelly. She starred in Mr. Sergio Lionel's Once Upon a Time in America. That little girl, Deborah, I don't know if you still remember her. Francis Coppola looked Jennifer Connelly up and down as if he was examining an object. For Hollywood moguls like them, no beautiful woman could amaze them. Being sized up by such a gaze, the girl, who had wanted to greet Francis Coppola, immediately felt reserved and uneasy. Her right hand, which she had been about to raise, gently drooped down as she clutched the hem of her gown. Well, not bad, but she's a little too beautiful. Tony, your movie is a drama. It's not a good thing for the female lead to be too beautiful. Tony Brandt was about to speak when Francis Coppola waved his hand and said, Of course, that's a movie you've been preparing for a long time. So it's your business how you choose the female lead. I won't interfere. No, Mr. Coppola, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't know where I got the investment from. Moreover, your vision is much better than mine. If you think it's not suitable, I'll definitely consider it carefully. Hearing Tony Brandt's words, the girl opened her mouth slightly and looked at Francis Coppola. Her fingers that were pinching the hem of her dress were trembling because of the force. She felt even more wronged. The role that she had fought so hard for was going to be ruined because of these people's casual words. For a moment, she wished that these big shots would be dragged to hell. Francis Coppola happened to see Connelly's expression. Coppola quickly patted Tony Brandt on the shoulder and said with a smile, Don't be like this, Tony. I was just saying. This little girl is still not bad. If you replace her, I don't know how many times she'll curse me secretly. How is that possible? Miss Connelly admires you very much. We were just talking about your movie, Tony Brandt hurriedly said as he gently nudged the girl standing beside him. Jennifer Connelly held back her sniffling. Just as she was about to perk up and say something, Francis Coppola had already led Al Pacino and Nicolas Cage to somewhere else. Frank, who was that person just now? I think I've seen him somewhere before. Al Pacino asked after the three of them walked away. Francis Coppola said casually, When we were shooting the first two parts of The Godfather, he was my assistant. That's why you have an impression of him. We've had occasional contact over the years. Some time ago, he planned to shoot a movie himself and came to me for help. I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I introduced him to a few investors. Al Pacino thought for a moment, but he still couldn't remember Tony Lambert, so he threw him to the back of his mind. Seeing that Nicolas Cage, who was standing on the other side of Francis Coppola, was still looking at the door, Al Pacino smiled and said, Well, Nick, I've already said that Eric rarely attends parties. He doesn't like this kind of occasion. You'd better prepare for the audition. As long as your performance can satisfy Eric, and you're a child of the Coppola family, I believe that Eric will definitely give you the male lead in Ghost. Hearing Al Pacino suddenly mention Eric, Francis Coppola also looked emotional. Speaking of which, a lot of people thought that the little guy wouldn't be able to survive the storm some time ago. Who would have thought that in the end, not only did he come out unscathed, but he also made Michael Eisner suffer a loss and gave him a script. Al, you've worked with Eric Williams before. What kind of person do you think he is? Al Pacino thought for a moment and shook his head gently. I can't say. At the end of the year before last, I had just returned to acting in a play on Broadway, and Eric came to me. We were in a coffee shop, and he told me about his script. I didn't find anything special about it and wanted to refuse, but then the little guy confidently told me about the script for Smelling Women. Then I found that I was moved, and soon I came to Los Angeles with him. If I have to say, he is very mature, far more mature than his peers. When you get along with him, you quickly forget that you're talking to a young man who's not even 20 years old. Instead, it's like you're talking to your peers. Now that you mention it, I'd like to meet this miraculous young man, Francis Coppola said with a smile. It seems that Steven contacted him and wanted to get the adaptation rights for Jurassic Park, but the little guy rejected him. Haha, in Hollywood, there aren't many people who can make Steven suffer. He definitely has that right now, Al Pacino said with a smile. Francis Coppola was stunned for a moment, then laughed. Yes, he does have that right. Maybe in a few years, the Big Seven in Hollywood will become the Big Eight. I really don't know how he created so many blockbuster movies. Last year, half of the top 10 box office hits were produced by Firefly. It's really amazing. As the three of them were talking, they saw that there seemed to be a commotion at the entrance of the manor. They looked at each other and walked in that direction in unison, wanting to see what was going on. Famek, why do you look a little uneasy? Is the dress not fitting? As they drove to the Coppola manor, Eric glanced at Farmak Jensen, who was sitting in the passenger seat, and asked curiously. At this time, the girl was wearing a rose-colored one-shoulder corset evening gown. Her hair was also tied up in a bun. Although she had only put on a simple layer of makeup, she was still many times more beautiful than when Eric saw her in the afternoon. No, nothing. It's just a professional habit, Farmak Jensen said embarrassedly, his hands finally relaxing on his knees. A professional habit? Eric was even more curious. Yes. The girl smiled awkwardly and explained. In the past, when I attended fashion shows, the clothes I wore were all made by the designers. If I accidentally tore them, us small models can't afford to pay for them. So, after the runway, I couldn't wait to take them off immediately. Chapter 313. Wow, you don't have that kind of impulse now, do you? The girl nodded slightly, her face turning even redder. Eric's smile suddenly turned naughty. Then you have to hold it in. At least wait until we're done with the party. The girl raised her small fist as if she wanted to punch Eric on the shoulder, but she retracted it in midair and said in a low voice, Eric, I think it's better to return this dress and shoes after the party. You don't like it? Of course not. I like it very much. Farmak Jensen bit her lower lip and continued, but it's too expensive. I can't accept it. As long as you like it, Eric said casually. Anyway, I'll return the dress tomorrow and return the money to you, the girl said in a firm tone. Eric turned his face and sized up the girl. His tone was faint and seemed to have some other meaning. Don't worry, you won't be able to return it. The car stopped outside the Coppola manor. As soon as they got out of the car, a black doorman came up and recognized Eric with his sharp eyes. He immediately grinned and took Eric's car keys and helped Eric drive the car to the parking lot. Nothing could be seen in the car at first, but after getting out of the car, Farmak Jensen put on high heels and reached a height of 6 feet 3 inches. Coupled with the rose-colored evening gown handmade by a famous designer, the moment he appeared, the few security guards and doormen at the entrance of the Coppola family's mansion revealed looks of amazement. Everyone had a sense of vanity, and Farmak Jensen was no exception. The girl was enjoying the stunned gazes of the people at the door. She enjoyed it even more than the most famous runway show she had ever walked. Because at that time, she was just a hanger. But now, the expensive evening gown had become her foil. However, Eric was still not satisfied. He looked at the girl's neck and said regretfully, It would be even more beautiful with a necklace, but time is tight today. Let's talk about it next time. I think this is already very good, the woman said as she held Eric's arm intimately. But I like perfection, not just good, Eric said as he handed the invitation to the security guard in charge of inspection. He then walked into the Coppola family's mansion. Although there was no shortage of beautiful women in Hollywood, there weren't many who were as tall and beautiful as Farmak Jensen. Therefore, when the two walked into the manor side by side, the guests who were chatting in groups of 3 or 5 turned their gazes to them in unison. Some of the female guests even subconsciously hugged the men beside them when they saw Farmak Jensen. Many of the male guests quickly identified Farmak Jensen as a model from his mannerisms and gait. In Hollywood, it was very easy to get a female model. However, before these people could have any other thoughts, they quickly noticed the young man beside the girl. Now in Hollywood, as long as one paid a little attention to Hollywood's current affairs, it was impossible not to recognize Eric. Those who were able to attend the Coppola family's party were definitely people of a certain status. The chances of them recognizing Eric were even higher. It looks like Williams. What do you mean it looks like? It's obviously him. Why is he here? I've never seen him at a party before. I heard that he doesn't like to socialize. At most, he only attends Firefly's internal parties. Wow, it's really Eric. He's so handsome. Who's that woman? He's a playboy. It's normal for him to have women around him. Hey Jilly, don't be fooled by his appearance. Should we go up and say hello? That's a bit abrupt. Let's go. It's just a greeting anyway. There aren't many opportunities like this. Eric, who felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange, couldn't help but slow down. This was the first time he attended a party after the incident at the beginning of the year. Moreover, it was a party where he didn't know many people. He couldn't predict how these people would react. Seeing how the people around him were pointing at him and Famke Janssen, Eric immediately regretted it. If he received a cold reception, it would be embarrassing for him. Just as he was unsure whether to continue walking forward or turn around and leave, the guests who recognized the two of them whispered for a while. Soon, 2 or 3 people walked towards him and Famke. Hello, Mr. Williams. I'm Gary Fredrickson, the executive producer of The Godfather 3. Welcome to this party. Mr. Williams, hello. I'm Richard Billette. I play a role in The Godfather 3. Mr. Williams, hello. Seeing the 3 people walking towards him, Eric breathed a sigh of relief and greeted them with a smile. When the hesitant people around him saw Eric's reaction, those who thought they had some power came over enthusiastically. Francis Coppola, who happened to notice the commotion, walked over curiously with Al Pacino and Nicolas Cage. What he saw was Eric being enthusiastically surrounded by a circle of people. Al Pacino was the first to recognize Eric through the gaps in the crowd. After exchanging a few words with Coppola, he walked towards the crowd. The people on the periphery quickly noticed Francis Coppola and the other two and consciously made way for them. Hey Eric, long time no see. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Al Pacino gave Eric a warm hug, then nodded at Famke Janssen before turning around. Eric, let me introduce you. This is Mr. Francis Coppola. Hello Mr. Coppola. I'm Eric Williams. I like your The Godfather series very much. I believe this The Godfather sequel will definitely become a classic once again. Thank you for your affirmation, Mr. Williams. Francis Coppola warmly shook hands with Eric. Just call me Eric, Mr. Coppola. Oh yes, this is Miss Famke Janssen. Eric gestured to the girl beside him. Francis Coppola smiled and shook hands with the girl, then gave his nephew a look. Nicolas Cage, who was already eager to try, quickly stepped forward. Hello, Mr. Williams. I'm Nicolas Coppola. Compared to Francis Coppola, Eric was naturally more familiar with Nicolas Cage. Although Cage was once known as the king of bad movies, it was undeniable that Nicolas Cage had filmed quite a number of classic movies. Hello, I think it's more cordial to call you Mr. Cage. I really liked your alluring Moonlight. You and Madame Cher's performances were excellent. Thank you, Eric. Just call me Nick. Nicolas Cage shook Eric's hand slightly, obviously a little excited. This detail made Eric feel a little strange. The other party's eagerness seemed a little too much. On second thought, Eric quickly realized why he had received this invitation. Nicolas Cage was obviously eyeing the role of the male lead in Ghost, just like Bridget Fonda. He sized up Nicolas Cage. Cage was only 26 years old, and his hairline was not as receding as it would be 20 years later. His hair was thick, and his eyes were deep. There was a hint of melancholy in his temperament. Noticing that Eric was sizing up Cage, Francis Coppola stood aside with a smile, and did not disturb him. Al Pacino also knew that Eric, the smart little guy, must have realized something, so he also stood aside with a smile. Although it felt a little strange to be scrutinized by someone 5 or 6 years younger than him, Cage sensibly stood where he was and did not speak. The whole party was to celebrate the upcoming filming of The Godfather 3. At this time, the director and the male lead, 2 important tasks, did not speak, and the people around them also sensibly quieted down. After more than a minute, Eric carefully considered it, and combined it with Cage's performance in City of Angels. He finally made up his mind and reached out his hand again. So Nick, are you willing to join Ghost? Cage's eyes widened in disbelief. As a descendant of the Coppola family, he knew better than ordinary people that it was not so easy to be the lead in a big commercial movie. It was not just a matter of acting skills, it even involved a lot of competition. because a successful commercial movie could completely turn an unknown Hollywood actor into a world-class superstar. Although there were many popular movies in Hollywood every year, most of the leading roles were taken up by famous actors, leaving very few opportunities for newcomers. Therefore, although he had been given the opportunity to audition for Ghost, and was fully confident in his acting skills, he still took the opportunity of The Godfather 3 party to persuade his uncle to invite Eric. He wanted to use the Coppola family's influence in Hollywood to promote it, hoping to increase the success rate of getting the role. He did not expect that in the end, things would become so simple. This made him want to pinch himself hard for a moment. This must be a dream. Before Cage could pinch himself, Al had already clenched his fist and punched Cage. Lucky boy, do you still need to hesitate? The impact on his shoulder finally woke Nicolas Cage up. He grabbed Eric's hand and shook it hard. Of course, Eric, thank you. Of course, Eric would not let it go so easily. After Ghost, there would be another Hollywood star in the Coppola family. How could he let go of such a favor so easily? Therefore, after letting go of Cage's hand, Eric turned to Francis Coppola and said with a smile, "Mr. Coppola, Nick is a descendant of the Coppola family. I believe that his acting skills will not disappoint me, right?" Eric's words seemed normal, but some of the people around quickly realized that Eric was hinting that the Coppola family owed him a favor. It was just that they did not know if Francis Coppola would be willing to admit it. Favors had to be returned. In the future, the greater the success of Ghost, the greater the favor would be. Cage saw the reactions on the faces of some people around him, and pondered for a moment. He also realized the meaning of Eric's words. He looked at his uncle with some apprehension. Although this uncle treated him well, and when he had just debuted, Francis Coppola had arranged several small roles for Cage in his movies, he was not Francis Coppola's son after all. Unexpectedly, Francis Coppola hesitated for 2 seconds, then smiled freely and grabbed Eric's hand. Of course, Eric, Nick will not let you down. If he can achieve some success in his acting career, it will also be the glory of the Coppola family. As expected of one of the 4 major Hollywood directors, his bearing was not something that ordinary people could compare to. When the people around heard Coppola say this, they sighed in their hearts. Then, without knowing who took the lead, there was a burst of applause. Eric let go of Coppola's hand with a slightly embarrassed expression. Well, it seemed that he had become a villain who wanted to be repaid. However, he did not regret it. He would be an idiot if he did not reach out at this time. He was not doing charity. It was just that. He glanced at the girl who was smiling and clapping beside him. Stupid woman. What are you clapping for? Are you laughing at me? Famke Jensen was acutely aware of the murderous intent in Eric's eyes. Her delicate hand froze in front of her for a moment before she realized what was going on. She hurriedly held onto Eric's arm intimately, like a cat who had caused trouble and was asking for trouble from its owner. Okay, Eric, let's go in. Let me introduce some people to you. After a moment, Francis Coppola smiled and gestured for him to enter. The few of them chatted as they walked towards the luxurious villa. To be honest, Eric, you should attend more parties. It will help you understand Hollywood in more detail. Oh right, your Freedom City in Malibu is really spectacular. Now many people regard it as a landmark in Malibu. When are you going to invite us over? I really want to see what a mansion built for more than $20 million looks like. Francis Coppola walked beside Eric and spoke like a familiar elder. Eric also smiled and echoed. He looked around the manor and chatted with Coppola. When they were about 10 meters away from the villa, Eric suddenly stopped and looked in one direction curiously. However, the graceful figure quickly disappeared into the crowd. Noticing Eric's strange behavior, the few of them curiously followed Eric's gaze, but did not see anything strange. However, seeing that Eric did not speak, they did not ask further. Chapter 314. Francis Coppola withdrew his gaze and took the initiative to introduce. Eric, there is a garden. If you are interested, you can go and have a look later. There are ornamental plants transplanted from the jungles of South America. No, I think I saw an acquaintance, but I may have mistaken her. Eric recalled the figure that flashed by just now, It seemed that she was holding a bald middle-aged man. Then, there was an 80% chance that he had mistaken her for an arrogant little girl like her. Shaking his head, Eric did not say anything more. He made an expression to the crowd that said it was okay, and continued to walk into the villa. Tony Brandt, who had been fawning over Jennifer Connelly, heard the faint applause from the manor's entrance. He inquired around and soon returned to Jennifer Connelly's side. "It's actually Eric Williams. That ridiculously young director. I really didn't expect it." The middle-aged man seemed to be lamenting about something. He did not realize that the girl beside him almost dropped the goblet in her hand when she heard the name Eric. She also became flustered. "Miss Connelly, do you know Eric Williams? He is a very magical young man. In less than 2 years, he has made a great name for himself in Hollywood. Being kissed by a lucky woman can no longer explain his good luck. He is like the illegitimate child of the goddess of luck." Tony Brandt seemed to think that his sentence was very humorous and laughed to himself. Jennifer Connelly could not laugh. Holding the goblet in her hand, she lowered her eyes slightly and a string of numbers flashed clearly in her mind. It was the phone number that Eric left her. However, she only dialed it once. It was 9 months ago when Dark War was released. She regretted it. But at that time, the phone happened to be unanswered and she did not leave a message. After that, as Eric's fame in Hollywood grew, the pride and inferiority in her heart made her lose the courage to call that number again. She felt that as long as she did this, and could only do this, she seemed to be able to protect something. She was also involved in the scandal between Eric and the other girls at the beginning of the year. However, later on, the media's attention was focused on several Hollywood actresses who had risen to fame because of Eric. Just like those actresses who had only briefly interacted with Eric, she was only treated as a name in a large number of scandals. Mixed in with a long list of names, she seemed so inconspicuous. It was probably because of this that the middle-aged man beside him asked him if he knew about Eric Williams. "Ha, what a joke. Who in Hollywood doesn't know about that guy?" Soon Jennifer Connelly saw Eric walking over with Francis Coppola. He looked about the same as he did a year ago, but there seemed to be a different woman beside him. Although the woman wasn't as beautiful as her, she was very tall, at least 4 inches taller than her. However, Jennifer Connelly forced herself to have a faint sense of superiority in her heart. At least, she was able to protect herself, but they had fallen. Yes, that's it. She was a little flustered in her mind, and Tony Brandt next to her was wondering if he should go up and get familiar with them. However, looking at the situation on the opposite side, because Francis Coppola was beside Eric, no one around went up. It was Francis Coppola who took the initiative to introduce Eric. Obviously, he hadn't reached the point where Francis Coppola would take the initiative to introduce him. Perhaps if he stood closer, Coppola would casually mention him. Seeing Eric occasionally take out his business card and hand it to others, Tony Brandt couldn't help but think that if he could get Eric Williams' contact information, it might come in handy in the future. After this idea popped up, Tony Brandt was a little eager to give it a try, but he couldn't muster up the courage for a while. Jennifer Connelly noticed the eagerness in the middle-aged man's eyes and realized something. She quickly said, "Mr. Brandt, I remember there are benches in the garden. Let's go sit there." All right. Tony Lambert was already feeling a little unconfident, and after hearing Connelly's words, he immediately built a ladder for himself in his heart and climbed down. The woman was afraid that Tony Brandt would go back on his word, so she took the initiative to take the man's arm and pulled him into the garden with a little force. The benches in the garden were all occupied by guests. The two of them searched for a while before sitting down near the table where the drinks were placed. Tony Brandt eagerly fetched 2 glasses of red wine and handed one to Connelly. Then he quickly found a topic to talk about. The woman seemed a little absent-minded. She kept sipping the red wine, and in just a few minutes, the red wine in the glass was empty. They had been here for a long time, but the woman had always maintained a restrained attitude. It had been an hour, and she had only drunk 2 glasses of red wine. Therefore, Tony Brandt, who noticed this situation, took another glass of red wine from the wine table next to him and handed it to the woman. Jennifer Connelly was immersed in some emotions at this time. She didn't think much about it. Instead, She thanked him and took the glass again. A few minutes later, another glass of red wine was unknowingly emptied. Tony Brandt saw the woman take the glass of red wine he handed to her again. She finally looked excited, and her heartbeat accelerated. After a few glasses of red wine, Jennifer Connelly seemed to realize something, but she was already a little tipsy. It was easy for a drunk person's defense to be very weak. Therefore, gradually, the woman even began to give up on herself. Although her drinking speed slowed down a lot, she didn't refuse every time Tony Brandt handed her a new glass of red wine. Eric, this is my daughter Sophia. Sophia, this is the youngest and most outstanding director in Hollywood, Eric Williams. In the villa, after walking around, Francis Coppola introduced another girl to Eric. Hello, Miss Coppola. Eric's expression didn't change at all. He warmly greeted the girl who was looking at him curiously. Hello, Eric. Can you call me Sophia? Sofia Coppola seemed to be more enthusiastic than Eric. I like your movies very much. It's hard to imagine that you're so young. Eric's expression changed. He remembered the woman's terrible performance in The Godfather 3 and said meaningfully, maybe you can make a good movie. Why don't you try? I believe your father will definitely support you. The girl's expression changed. She looked at her father and said, I can't do it. I'm not a genius like you. I'm still so young. Also, Dad has already decided to let me play the role of the Godfather's daughter in The Godfather 3. I think I should be like my cousin and try to develop into an actress. Of course, you should try everything when you're young. Only then can you find the most suitable path for yourself. Eric continued. Wow, you don't sound like you're your age at all. You sound like an old man. The girl couldn't help but say. Sophia, don't be so rude. I think Eric is right. Francis Coppola glared at his daughter. The girl stuck out her tongue and said, still unconvinced, I'm right. Otherwise, why would an old man like you agree with him? Francis Coppola looked at Eric helplessly. The girl smiled mischievously and suddenly said to the tall woman standing beside Eric, My name is Famke Jensen. Famke Jensen introduced himself. Then Miss Jensen, can you let me have Eric for a while and let us dance? The tall woman shrugged and looked at Eric. Of course. Hey, I don't think I've agreed, Eric said with a smile as he allowed the girl to pull him onto the dance floor. Are you going to refuse? Sofia Coppola looked up and asked. She was a little petite. Even though she was wearing high heels, she was still 10 centimeters shorter than Eric. Okay, of course not. Eric shrugged and gently hugged the girl's waist. After a while, the girl who was gently dancing to the music suddenly said, Hey, you seem a little absent-minded? Eric asked doubtfully, Is it obvious? How can I tell if it's not obvious? The girl pouted and said gloomily. To be honest, Sofia Coppola's lips were a little thick. When she spoke, one side of her upper lip liked to curl up, making her look even more awkward. Although in the eyes of Westerners, thicker lips were sexier, Eric still felt that thin lips looked better. Okay, I apologize, Eric said as his thoughts ran wild. Sofia Coppola tilted her head and thought for a while before asking. By the way, what you said just now seemed to be implying something. Can you tell me what you mean? You want to hear the truth? Eric asked as he stared at the girl. Sofia Coppola nodded without hesitation. If you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to be so wishy-washy. Eric thought for a while. It would be good if he could get the girl to give up the idea of harming the classic series, The Godfather. In his memory, Sofia Coppola's performance in The Godfather, Part 3 was indeed terrible. With the help of an Oscar-level veteran like Al Pacino, it gave people a strong sense of drama. The 2 Golden Raspberry Awards were not undeserved at all. As the two of them did not have much of a friendship, Eric did not say it in front of Francis Coppola. It was a taboo to talk about such things when you were not close. However, now that he was alone with the girl, as long as he was tactful, it would not have much of an impact. Even if the other party did not listen to his suggestion, he could just treat it as a joke and laugh it off. Chapter 3:15. After pondering over the wording, Eric said, Since your father asked you to play the role of Marie Corleone, I think you must have participated in the audition before, right? Of course, Sofia Coppola nodded. So, what did your father say about your audition? Eric asked patiently. Hearing this question, the girl was obviously a little guilty. Dad said my acting is not bad. Sofia Coppola's hesitation allowed Eric to continue the topic without any pressure. You grew up on the Coppola family set and have seen countless actors perform. You must be aware of your acting skills, right? I think that if I rehearsed more during the shoot, I would definitely be able to meet the requirements. And Dad also said that it doesn't matter if I don't act well. After all, this is the first time. As if she remembered her father's encouragement, Sofia Coppola raised her head and looked at Eric confidently. Eric said with some emotion, "From this, it can be seen how much your father loves you. You must know better than me what the Godfather series means to your father. This series is the glory of Francis Coppola as the director. I think that no matter to any other actor in The Godfather 3, your father would never say it doesn't matter if I don't act well. Only you are so tolerant. In this case, you should think of your father. The Godfather 3 is the end of the Godfather series. I believe that no one in the Coppola family wants it to be flawed because of an actor's performance, right?" Sofia Coppola heard Eric's words and lowered her head in silence. Eric stroked the girl's back and patted her gently. He continued, "In Hollywood, as the daughter of the Coppola family, you have more opportunities than others. If you are really interested in acting, I think it's best to be like your cousin. Start from small roles and slowly hone your acting skills." After a while, Sofia Coppola looked up. Eric could tell from the girl's expression that she had made up her mind, so he smiled at her. Unexpectedly, Sofia Coppola did not appreciate it. Her small hand, which was wrapped around Eric's waist, scratched his back in dissatisfaction. "Eric, everyone says that you're a playboy. As a playboy, shouldn't you be glib-tongued when you see a woman? Your reaction is not right at all." The change of topic was so sudden that Eric didn't know how to respond. Seeing Eric's speechless appearance, the girl's face dimmed. She said with some self-abasement, all right. I know I'm not that pretty, but you don't have to be like this, right?" Eric quickly shook his head. "No, Sofia, you are very beautiful. If you don't believe me, you can ask your father. How could my father say that I'm not pretty?" The girl rolled her eyes at him, but she didn't pursue the matter. After the song ended, the crowd on the dance floor began to leave. Eric held Sofia Coppola's small hand and walked out. "Eric, I've decided to listen to your suggestion. I'll start from small roles." At the long table, the girl took a glass of red wine and gestured to Eric. "I hope we can work together in the future." "We definitely will." Eric's smile didn't change as he clinked glasses with the girl, but in his heart he added, "Under the circumstances that you're not an actress." "Then have fun. I'll go talk to my father about this now." With that, the girl turned and left. After the girl left, Eric looked around but couldn't find Famke Jensen. He thought that the girl must have gone outside the villa. In addition, there was something else on his mind. Eric decisively walked out. He had to confirm it before he was satisfied. Along the way, Eric greeted the guests who came up to greet him. Soon he arrived at the garden. No, Mr. Brandt, I can't drink any more," the girl murmured to herself, and felt the world turn round and round, and she swayed unsteadily to one side. Tony Brandt nimbly supported the girl, and let Jennifer Connelly lean on him. Although it wasn't that no one had seen Tony Brandt get the girl drunk, this kind of thing often happened at Hollywood parties. In addition, Jennifer Connelly didn't resist much from the beginning to the end. The guests who saw this naturally treated it as a consensual act. Miss Connelly?" Tony Brandt whispered into Jennifer Connelly's ear twice. The girl glanced at him with hazy almond-shaped eyes. She seemed to be aware of her current situation. Her small hand subconsciously pushed the middle-aged man away, but she didn't have any strength at all. This made Tony Brandt completely relieved. He raised his voice enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "Miss Connelly, I'll send you back." Of course, the girl couldn't have any answer. Some of the male guests who heard Tony Brandt's words just blinked at their companions. At the same time, they were a little envious of Tony Brandt's luck with women. The female guests frowned slightly, but they didn't intervene. Tony Brandt had just put Jennifer Connelly on his shoulder and was about to take a shortcut to go straight out when a cold voice sounded. "Sir, where are you taking her?" Tony Brandt's body stiffened. He secretly cursed for being a busybody, but he had to temporarily put the girl on the chair next to him. He turned around and saw Eric with one hand in his trouser pocket and the other holding a glass of red wine. He glanced between him and the girl expressionlessly. "Mr. Williams, nice to meet you. I'm Tony Brandt, also a director." Tony Brandt recognized Eric. He quickly calmed down and reached out his hand to Eric. Eric just looked at the hand that reached out to him. He raised his chin expressionlessly in Jennifer Connelly's direction and asked, "Where are you taking her?" Tony Brandt retracted his hand awkwardly and looked at the girl behind him. If he let go of her now, perhaps nothing would happen. Unfortunately, in the process of getting Jennifer Connelly drunk, Tony Brandt also inevitably drank some wine. At this time he was already 70% drunk. When he thought of the girl's beautiful face, his mind was completely occupied by lust. He said, "Mr. Williams, are you talking about Jenny? She's my girlfriend. She accidentally got drunk, so I'm going to take her back." Eric's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the drunk girl and couldn't help but say, "She's drunk. Of course, you can say whatever you want, but I definitely don't believe that she'll be your girlfriend." Tony Brandt was stunned. Then he spread out his hands in amusement. "Mr. Williams, Jenny came with me." "Shut up, don't call her Jenny." Eric suddenly raised his voice as if he was provoked. Tony Brandt was so scared that he trembled. He also sobered up a lot. However, at this time, because of Eric's words, the surrounding guests also came over curiously. Some of them recognized Eric's identity. When they saw that he and Tony Brandt seemed to be about to have a conflict, they thought about it and didn't stay to watch the show. They turned and hurriedly left the garden. Seeing that everyone was surrounding him, Tony Brandt, who was in a dilemma, quickly raised his voice. "Mr. Williams, you're too rude. Miss Connelly came with me. If she's not my girlfriend, is she your girlfriend? There are so many people here who can testify that Miss Connelly and I are together. What else do you want?" The surrounding guests looked at the three people in the hall. Most of them didn't know Tony Brandt, but Eric's identity was well known. At this time, when they heard Tony Brandt's words, everyone associated it with the rumors of Eric being a playboy. They pointed at Eric one after another, but because of Eric's current identity, no one dared to speak up for Tony Brandt. Tony Brandt saw that the surrounding situation seemed to be on his side. He was drunk and confident. He immediately said, "Mr. Williams, don't you think you're being unreasonable? My girlfriend is drunk. I just want to take her away. What right do you have to stop me?" Crack, with a soft sound, the goblet that was broken in two fell to the ground. The crisp sound of glass hitting the cobblestone road startled the surrounding people. Eric looked at the wound on his hand that was cut by the goblet in a daze. He whispered, "You can't take her away. At least wait until she sobers up. If she admits that she's your girlfriend, then I'll apologize." Tony Brandt saw Eric lowering his head and thought that he was guilty. His voice became louder. "Mr. Williams, you don't have the right to do this. Jane, Miss Connelly is drunk and very uncomfortable. She needs to rest." After Tony Brandt finished speaking, he glared at Eric fiercely. He turned around and was about to help the girl up from the chair again. At this time the crowd opened up a gap. A group of 7 or 8 people walked in with anxious expressions. "Eric, what's wrong with your hand?" Famke Janssen, who came with Francis Coppola, saw Eric's right hand dripping with blood at a glance. He came over worriedly and grabbed Eric's hand to check. He quickly pressed on the bleeding wound. On the other side, Sofia Coppola also came over. She quickly untied the silk scarf that matched her gown and bandaged Eric's wound with Famke Janssen. Seeing that Eric was fine, Francis Coppola looked at the mood of the crowd. Only then did he pull a person over and ask, "Corit, what happened?" The guest named Corit happened to see Tony Brandt pouring alcohol into the girl's mouth. Then, he saw Francis Coppola's daughter and another tall girl carefully treating Eric's wounds. He quickly understood the situation, and immediately recounted how Tony Brandt had gotten the girl drunk, as well as the situation that had just taken place, embellishing the details. The moment Francis Coppola appeared, Tony Brandt had a bad feeling in his heart. The momentum he had just gathered was swept away, and he was completely sober. Before Tony Brandt could think of a way to remedy the situation, Jennifer Connelly, who had been slumped in the chair, said in a weak voice, "Water, I want water." Although the voice was very soft, it attracted the attention of many people. Sofia Coppola saw Jennifer Connelly's beautiful face. The girl was still very gossipy. After recognizing Jennifer Connelly, she recalled the scattered news in the newspaper some time ago. She said to Eric with a little jealousy, "Wow, Eric, your other girlfriend." The girl's unintentional words with a hint of sarcasm made Farmak Jensen's movements stagnate. Hearing this, Tony Brandt's legs went soft and he almost collapsed to the ground. Although Francis Coppola knew that Eric was a playboy, he was not as concerned about gossip as his daughter. When Francis Coppola first learned about the situation from Corrit, he did not know how to deal with it. After all, although Tony Brandt's methods were a little underhanded, if Jennifer Connelly did not agree, she definitely would not have gotten drunk so easily. Therefore, Coppola originally thought that Eric had taken a fancy to Tony Brandt's female companion and had acted impulsively to save the damsel in distress. But at this moment, hearing his daughter's words, Francis Coppola immediately believed it. He questioned Tony Brandt sternly. "Tony, how could you do such a thing?" "Mr. Coppola, this is a misunderstanding. Miss Connelly just accidentally got drunk. I was about to send her home." Francis Coppola heard that Tony Brandt still wanted to quibble under such circumstances, and his tone became even sterner. "There are so many people here. Do you still want to lie?" "No, I didn't. Tony Brandt quickly waved his hand, and then looked at Eric. "Mr. Williams, this is really a misunderstanding. If I had known." Eric sighed and ignored Tony Brandt. He went forward and picked up the drunk girl by the waist before saying to Francis Coppola, "I'm sorry, Mr. Coppola. I've caused you trouble." "It's nothing," Coppola said, and then said to his daughter, "Sophia, take Eric to a room and let this miss rest. There should be hangover soup in the kitchen." "Eric, come with me." The girl immediately led Eric out of the crowd. Eric took a few steps before he suddenly remembered something. He turned back and said to the tall girl, "Farmy, you come too." Farmy Jensen, who originally thought that he was going to be awkwardly left behind, breathed a sigh of relief and quickly followed through the crowd. Seeing this, the guests couldn't help but look envious. He was indeed a playboy. He had one in his arms, and he still wouldn't let go of the other. When Eric's figure disappeared, Francis Coppola said to Tony Brandt, "Tony, you can go. Don't come back again." "No, Mr. Coppola, this is really a misunderstanding. I didn't." Seeing that Coppola was about to turn and leave, Tony Brandt didn't dare to quibble anymore. He grabbed Coppola's arm tightly and begged, "I'm sorry, Mr. Coppola. I was wrong. I really was wrong. I'll apologize to Mr. Williams and Miss Connelly now. Mr. Coppola, please give me another chance." Coppola shook his arm in disgust, but he couldn't shake Tony Brandt off. He could only say, "Tony, let's go. Change the female lead and finish your movie well. If you continue to pester me, I'll call Cliff." Hearing that Coppola was going to call the investors of his movie, Tony Brandt immediately let go of his hand. Without his hold, Coppola left without looking back. The guests who had originally been watching the show looked at the middle-aged man with pity. If word got out that he was kicked out by Francis Coppola and offended Hollywood's upstart Eric Williams, Tony Brandt wouldn't be able to survive in Hollywood in the future. After all, if anyone wanted to work with him again, they would definitely involuntarily think about whether the Coppola family or Eric Williams would have any ideas. This kind of potential risk was unpredictable, and it could cause a lot of trouble at any time. Hollywood didn't lack small directors who wanted to make a name for themselves. Not many people were willing to take this kind of risk. "Eric, leave her here. I've already asked the servant to bring some hangover soup." Sofia Coppola took Eric all the way to the second floor of the villa. She opened a room and let Eric in. "Thank you, Sofia." Eric put Connelly on the bed and looked around before he reacted. "This isn't your room, right?" Sofia hurriedly stuffed a few undergarments into the wardrobe. When she heard Eric's question, she blushed and explained, "Yes." Sensing the girl's embarrassment, Eric didn't look around anymore. He looked at Jennifer Connelly's blushing face. He hadn't seen her for a year. The girl's face was a little thinner, but she looked more beautiful. A middle-aged maid dragged a tray to the door and looked into the room. Famke Jensen, who was standing at the door, took the tray. "Let me do it." The maid nodded and handed the tray to the tall girl before she turned and left. "Eric." Famke Jensen handed him the hangover soup. Eric took the bowl and looked up at the girl. "Sorry, Famke." Famke Jensen forced a smile and said, "It's okay." In a daze, Jennifer Connelly felt that she had been placed on a large bed. She vaguely recalled some of the situations before she got drunk. She felt that something was wrong and wanted to struggle up, but she couldn't summon any strength in her body. Soon, she felt herself being helped up by someone, and a strange yet familiar voice rang in her ears. She struggled to open her eyes, and soon revealed a slightly self-deprecating smile. Chapter 316. I must have seen wrongly. How could it be him? Such a faint thought popped up in his mind. Connelly's mouth twitched in self-mockery, but he was unable to smile. She brought the spoon to her lips and opened her mouth weakly. The warm liquid flowed down her throat and into her stomach, and she instantly felt much better. However, after a few mouthfuls, her stomach churned, and she retched twice before she felt her body floating again. A moment later, she felt herself lying on the side of the toilet bowl. The gentle tapping on her back made her unable to hold it in any longer, and she vomited out all the wine that she had drunk the entire night. After coming out of the bathroom, Eric patiently fed the girl the hangover soup. Finally, he wiped the corner of her mouth before standing up. Behind him, Famke and Sophia looked at Eric with complicated gazes. "Eric, you're so considerate. If only my future boyfriend could treat me like this." Sophia saw that Eric had finally finished his work and spoke her mind without hiding anything. Although Famke Jensen didn't say a word, there was less jealousy in his gaze when he looked at Eric. There was more gentleness in it. Eric smiled and wiped his hands with a towel before saying to Sophia Coppola, "Sophia, can you let her rest here for the night? She just vomited out all the alcohol in her stomach. She definitely won't dirty your bedroom with alcohol again." Sophia Coppola asked in surprise, "You're not bringing her back?" After the girl finished speaking, she suddenly remembered that there was another woman in the room and subconsciously covered her mouth. Eric also looked at Famke Jensen apologetically before explaining, "I think you must have misunderstood. I haven't seen her in a year. I didn't expect to meet her here today. We don't have the kind of relationship you think we have." Wow. Sophia Coppola sighed. She didn't know what to say. They hadn't seen each other for more than a year, yet they were still treating each other so well. Who would believe that there was no relationship between the two of them? However, Sophia Coppola didn't say anything else. When Famke Jensen heard Eric's words, although he did not quite believe it, he inexplicably heaved a sigh of relief. "Then let her sleep here. I'll make do with the guest room for the night," Sophia Coppola said after some thought. Eric thanked them, but he didn't leave immediately. Instead, under the strange gazes of the two girls, he took Jennifer Connelly's handbag from the table and took out a small address book from it. After searching for a while, Eric quickly picked up the phone beside him and called Jennifer Connelly's agent. "Hello, Jim Lester. This is Eric Williams. Are you in Los Angeles? Okay, come to the headquarters of Firefly Films at 10 tomorrow morning. We'll talk about Jennifer Connelly. That's all. Goodbye." After hanging up the phone, Eric flipped through the address book again and quickly found a page. This page was obviously different from the other pages. It seemed to have been rubbed many times. The corners were gone, but the phone number of his mansion in Beverly Hills was clearly written on it. With a smile, Eric closed the address book and put it back into the girl's white handbag. After getting up and looking at the sleeping Jennifer Connelly, Eric pulled the tall girl beside him. "Famke, we should go." Sophia Coppola instructed a maid to stay in the room to take care of Jennifer Connelly. She walked out with Eric and Famke. "Don't you want to play for a while? It's still early." "No, it'll be around 11 by the time we drive back to Malibu," Eric said as he looked at his watch. The girl didn't ask him to stay any longer. After going downstairs, Eric said goodbye to Francis Coppola and the others before leaving with Famke Janssen. An hour later, after parking the car in the garage of the Sharp Corner Manor, Eric walked into the villa with the girl. After tugging at his tie, Eric said to the girl who was looking around curiously, "Sorry, Famke. Tonight must be a bit of a bummer." "No, I think it's not bad." The girl looked at Eric with a smile. In the past, as an unknown model, it was impossible for her to participate in such a party. Seeing Eric walk towards the floor-to-ceiling glass window by the sea, the girl followed. After a few steps, she couldn't help but say, "Your place is really big. It doesn't feel like a place for people to live in at all." Realizing the ambiguity in his words, Famke Janssen quickly corrected her. "Oh no, I mean it doesn't feel like a place for people to live in at all. This place is too big. It's more like a library or museum." Freedom City in Iron Man appeared very stingy because of its setting. However, if it was really built according to the design in the movie, the main building of the villa was more than 5,000 square meters. It was indeed much more impressive than many school libraries. Eric didn't mind the mistake in the girl's words. He brought a pot of coffee to the round table by the window and turned off all the lights in the hall. When the surroundings suddenly darkened, the girl cried out in fright, "Hey!" But soon, her eyes adjusted to the darkness and saw a faint light shining through the glass window. She walked to the glass wall and looked out. Below was the pitch-black sea. In the night sky, a few stars dotted the surroundings of the full moon, bringing with it a tranquil beauty. "How is it?" Eric asked softly as he sat down on a chair by the round table and poured coffee for the two of them. The girl carefully leaned against the wall and admired the night view outside the window for a while. She sighed and said, "It's very beautiful. I take back what I said just now. This is a place for people to live in. The apartment I rented in Burbank can't see this. Not only that, but I can't sleep because of the sound of passing cars all night. I'm almost traumatized from the noise." Eric leaned back and looked at the girl who walked to the hanging chair opposite him and sat down. She held the coffee cup he had pushed over and gently swayed it with a look of admiration. The girl was still wearing her rose-red gown. The hem of her gown fluttered as she swayed. Her feet that had taken off her high heels were faintly discernible under the hem of her gown. Her slender body leaned against the white egg-shaped chair, looking extremely beautiful. It gave Eric the urge to take a photo. "If you like, you can stay here," Eric said again after admiring it for a while. Upon hearing this, Famke Janssen's gently rocking motion of the space chair came to a stop. Her expression was clearly tempted, but she quickly shook her head and looked at Eric. "If I live here, I don't even know what position I should place myself in." Eric was taken aback, but he quickly smiled and said to Famke Janssen, "I remember in the office this afternoon, you said that I'm too soft-hearted." Famke Janssen revealed a puzzled expression and let out a puzzled sound. "Huh." Eric didn't answer the girl's puzzlement and continued, "When I saw Jennifer Connelly again tonight, I suddenly regretted letting her go last year." "Ah. Do you know Howard Hughes?" Eric's topic seemed to have strangely changed to something else. Famke Janssen tilted his head and thought for a moment before shaking his head. "I don't know." Eric was taken aback. He recalled that the girl wasn't an American but was born in the Netherlands. She came to the United States when she was an adult, so it was inevitable that she didn't know the legendary figure Howard Hughes. Since the girl didn't know, Eric explained, "Howard Hughes is one of the greatest filmmakers in Hollywood, and he's also one of the greatest playboys. His dating partners almost covered all the famous A-list actresses in Hollywood in the 30s and 40s. Katharine Hepburn, Bette Davis, Susan Hayward, Jean Tilney, Rita Hayworth, Ava Gardner. Perhaps you haven't heard of many of them, but as long as you check, you'll find that any one of them will be crowned as the most dazzling or greatest actress." A magazine once revealed that Howard Hughes once had as many as 164 girlfriends. He hid his mistresses all over Los Angeles. Famke Janssen listened to Eric narrate Howard Hughes's glorious resume, as if he was telling a story. Furthermore, the man's tone seemed to become more and more admiring, yearning, and even a little fanatical. The girl couldn't help but open her mouth slightly. Taking advantage of Eric's pause, she interjected. Don't tell me you want to be like him? Eric paused for a moment, then quickly said with determination and fanaticism, why not? In terms of achievements, at my age, I've already far surpassed Howard Hughes when I was the same age. Furthermore, he inherited his father's fortune, while I started from scratch. In terms of wealth, I'll definitely be richer in the future. In terms of status, I have Firefly. In a few years, this film company will be able to join the ranks of the movie giants. So why not? Famke Janssen flung his right hand around in surprise, but he didn't make any gestures. But no buts. Eric suddenly waved his hand. I've decided. As long as it's a woman I like, I'll definitely hold her tightly in my hands in the future, no matter what method I use. Famke Janssen subconsciously shrank into the space chair. I can't be one of them, right? Eric's tone had a hint of wickedness. What do you think? I haven't decided yet. The girl's mind was already in a daze from Eric's devastating words. She seemed to be mumbling to herself. Come here. Eric's deep voice had a hint of bewitchment. When the girl heard this, she subconsciously put down the coffee cup in her hand, got up, and walked to Eric. Her body was soft and very comfortable, but she was also very tired. She didn't want to open her eyes. However, she seemed to feel that she still had to do something. What was it? The girl's thoughts turned in a daze before she remembered that she still had work to do. Right, I'm filming a TV series. I'll be scolded if I'm late. Then he suddenly sat up, grabbed his hair and rubbed his eyes. Only then did Famke Janssen clearly see his surroundings. This was a very large bedroom with windows on all four sides. At this time, all of them had been opened, and the morning light shone in, illuminating the bedroom. However, there was no dust in the air that floated around with the sunlight. She quickly recalled everything that had happened last night. It felt like a dream, but how could it be a dream? It's over. I seem to have agreed to something. The girl mumbled to herself. She was barefoot, but she didn't see any clothes around her. She could only search the small wardrobe beside her and find one to wear. As her height was about the same as Eric's, although the shirt was very big, her height was similar to Eric's. She couldn't look like a little woman wearing it. Her two legs were completely exposed. She curiously circled the bedroom. The bedroom was located at the highest point of the manor, and the view was abnormally wide. The girl saw that to the north was Malibu City. The densely packed small villas looked a little laughable. Well, she didn't know why she had such a feeling either. With this thought in mind, she walked to the other side. The scenery in front of her was even more stunning. The sun had already risen high, and the sea and sky were a line. The azure blue intertwined indiscriminately. It was a beautiful sight. After hesitating for a few minutes in the bedroom, the girl opened the wardrobe and rummaged through it. She slammed the wardrobe door shut. Why are there only shirts? There aren't any trousers. She looked down at her outfit and glanced at the alarm clock on the table. It was already 8:30. It would take at least an hour to drive from here to the filming site on the other side of the Santa Monica Mountains. She would definitely be late. However, no one would dare scold her today, right? She thought smugly. It seemed that, although her performance was terrible, she had never been scolded. The reason she was always worried about being scolded seemed to be because that Brad Pitt was often scolded, even though his performance was much better than hers. Thinking of that figure, she quickly understood why. She didn't know why, but she was delighted. Then he walked down the stairs and cautiously glanced at the hall. It would be terrible if someone saw him dressed like this. Famke, you're awake. Wow. Eric had just finished his routine exercise and had just taken a shower. When he came out with a towel wrapped around him, he saw the girl standing on the stairs and couldn't help but exclaim. Eric's gaze happened to be looking up from below. Famke Janssen saw Eric's expression and his cheeks heated up. He helplessly tugged at the hem of his shirt and complained again. Why are there only shirts in your bedroom wardrobe? There aren't even any trousers. In order to make the layout of the bedroom more simple, the wardrobe in the bedroom was very elaborate. Eric's clothes were placed in different compartments, so the girl definitely couldn't find them. However, Eric didn't explain. Instead, he looked the girl up and down with interest and teased, just to see this situation. Pooey bastard. The girl cursed under her breath and shyly tugged at the hem of her shirt. Eric didn't want the girl to continue being embarrassed. He smiled and said, "All right, Famek, I do have a few sets of Drew's clothes, but you definitely won't be able to wear them. You'll have to wear yesterday's costume. I'll go get them for you. I think they're still in the car." Famek Jensen hurriedly waved his hand and urged, "Go quickly. Bring all my clothes over. Don't leave a single one behind." Understood. Eric turned and walked away. The girl hesitated for a moment on the stairs before carefully walking down. She was still barefoot as she walked around the hall. Eric quickly returned and handed the clothes and shoes in the bag to the girl. He pointed in the direction of the bathroom. "You can take a shower while you're at it." "Thank you." Famek Jensen took it. "Go quickly." The corner of Eric's mouth curled into an inexplicable smile. Seeing this situation, the girl suddenly felt a little flustered and hurriedly fled. 10 minutes later, the two were sitting in the dining room. Looking at Eric, who was eating breakfast and reading the newspaper, Famek Jensen complained, "We're so late this morning. We definitely won't be able to film anything." "Don't worry, it'll be quick," Eric said as he flipped through a page of the newspaper without looking up. "It'll take at least an hour to drive from here to the set. It'll probably be past 10 by the time we get there. I still have to do my makeup, set up the scene, and rehearse my lines." The girl drank a mouthful of milk and grumbled, "It won't take that long. We'll be half an hour late at most." Famek Jensen looked at Eric in disdain. "Humph, you make it sound so easy. I can fly there." Eric finally looked up and raised his eyebrows. "You guessed right. I did call for a helicopter. It'll take less than half an hour to send you there." The girl opened her mouth, then suddenly shook her head. No, that's too ostentatious. If that's the case, all of them will definitely, Eric said with a chuckle. "That's the effect I want. Let's see who dares to have any ideas about you in the future." "You're being unreasonable." The girl was stunned and quickly retorted. "All right, baby, whatever you say," Eric continued. "By the way, a real estate agent will be looking for you this afternoon. Didn't you say yesterday that the apartment in Burbank was too noisy? You'll wrap up early and get him to take you to Beverly Hills to pick a villa. I'll let the crew know." I can't afford to rent that place now." The girl shook her head. Eric said with a smile, "Pick whatever you want. Whichever building you pick is yours. I'll pay with my card." Famek Jensen still shook his head firmly. "I don't want it. Even if I want it, I can earn money to buy it myself." "Well, you can buy the furniture yourself. I'm not going to care." "I don't want it," the girl said again. "By the way, do you want a car? How about a Lamborghini?" "Well, no, the Lamborghini's seatbelt is too hard. I think a Ferrari is more suitable for women," Eric said. He suddenly thought of the scene where the girl drove a convertible Ferrari and raced with Bond in James Bond's The Golden Eye. It was so cool. "Well, a Ferrari then. It's settled." Seeing that Eric didn't seem to hear his repeated rejections, Famek Jensen felt a little helpless. He also felt a little sweet that even he didn't know about. He could only keep a straight face and eat his breakfast in protest. However, it didn't have any effect. Chapter 317. After breakfast, Eric brought the girl outside the manor. A red and white Bell helicopter was already parked on the helipad. When the helicopter pilot saw Eric, he quickly jumped down from the helicopter and walked towards them. He was a tall white man who was nearly 2 meters tall. He had a faint stubble on his face and sharp eyes. His words and actions had the demeanor of a soldier. He was probably a retired soldier. "Hello, Mr. Williams. I'm Mark Billman." The tall man walked up to Eric and Famek Jensen and introduced himself. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Billman." Eric shook hands with him. "I'm sure you already know what your mission is." "Of course." Mark Billman nodded and said to Famek Jensen, "Miss Jensen, follow me." "Eric, I still think." The girl looked at the helicopter and turned to Eric, still hesitant. Eric hugged the girl and kissed her on the cheek. "All right, Famek. It's nothing. You'll get used to it in the future." Miss Jensen, are you worried about air sickness? Don't worry about that. It only takes about 10 minutes to get to Calabasas from here. It won't take long. Seeing that Mark Billman had spoken, Famke Jensen did not say anything else. Otherwise, it would definitely embarrass Eric. Soon the girl boarded the helicopter. Eric took a few steps back and waved at the girl who was slowly ascending into the air. He watched as the helicopter gradually disappeared into the distance and finally became a small white. He thought to himself that perhaps he should hire an exclusive helicopter team. That way, he could save a lot of time traveling to and from the city. Moreover, compared to private jets, helicopters were much cheaper. The price of a helicopter was only equivalent to a high-end sports car. Even if he hired a team to pilot and maintain the helicopter, it would not cost much in a year. Furthermore, he could protect his privacy this way. No matter how strong the paparazzi were, it was not realistic for them to chase after the helicopter. Back at the villa, Eric walked to the space chair where the two of them had chatted last night. He saw that there were still pieces of scarlet silk scattered around. Obviously, this was the remains of the expensive evening gown from last night. After casually picking up the scattered pieces of fabric and putting them into the trash can, Eric walked to the space chair and sat down. He looked at the sponge outside the window and thought about what had happened the day before. Since he had already made up his mind, Eric did not intend to change it. Although Eric often told the women in the past, including Drew, "You are my woman," in a very domineering manner, if they were determined to leave him, Eric did not intend to stop them. As a person who had lived two lives, he was originally very open-minded about many things. But now he had decided not to let such things happen again. Eric was determined to keep all the women he liked by his side. This was not a delusion. He could give them everything they wanted, whether it was material or fame. Didn't the women who could step into Hollywood pursue fame and fortune? Therefore, if he gave them everything they wanted, then they had to give him what they wanted. This was an equivalent exchange, very fair. Of course, all of this was based on strength. When Eric had enough power in Hollywood, those women who took what they wanted but did not want to pay for it would certainly have to consider the consequences. Famke Jensen was the first in his plan. After spending half a day together, Eric more or less understood the tall woman's personality. She was proud, confident, and had some feminist tendencies. But at the same time, Famke Jensen also yearned for the prosperity and luxury of Hollywood. This was also the reason why the woman did not refuse Eric's gift of the Beverly property at breakfast. If it were not for Eric, the woman might have needed a long time to obtain all of this. In his previous life, Famke Jensen had always been a second-tier actress in Hollywood. Although she played Jean Grey in the X-Men series, compared to Halle Berry, who played the role of Lady Stormsword, the woman could only be considered a small vase. In his memory, the woman was like many stars in Hollywood who encountered bottlenecks in their development and switched to acting in American dramas. And now, although Famke Jensen was acting as the female lead of The X-Files under Eric's arrangement, this TV series would definitely have a deep impact on the actress' image. But as long as Eric was willing, the woman could easily switch to the big screen. She could even develop on both the big and small screens at the same time. Of course, in order to obtain all of this, there must be a prerequisite. After thinking for a while, Eric smiled and got up. Now, it was time to settle the matter of the other woman. Jennifer Connelly woke up very early. She pulled the blanket and looked at the bedroom in a daze. Her head still hurt from the hangover. As a girl, she quickly realized that this was obviously a girl's room. Moreover, there were no signs of being violated on her body. This discovery made her heave a sigh of relief. There were only a few vague fragments in her mind. It was difficult for her to recall what had happened last night. She only remembered that she was a little upset, so she drank a lot and got very drunk. And then there was no and then. When she woke up, she found herself here. The weak morning light was gradually replaced by sunlight. The bedroom became brighter and brighter, so bright that even the curtains could not block it. Just as she was at a loss, the bedroom door was pushed open. She hurriedly pulled the blanket up and wrapped herself up. She looked at the door with some apprehension. A girl wearing a dark blue long-sleeve t-shirt and jeans walked in. Seeing her wide-open eyes, she smiled. revealing 2 rabbit teeth. Miss Connolly, you're awake? Jennifer Connolly vaguely remembered that this girl should be Francis Coppola's daughter, Sofia Coppola. She had seen her when she arrived at the party last night. Hello, Miss Coppola. Excuse me, this is my house. You were drunk last night. Eric let you sleep here. Eric Williams. She quickly remembered the high-spirited young figure she had seen from afar last night. When she heard Sofia Coppola's words, for some reason, Jennifer Connolly suddenly felt wronged. Then tears welled up in her eyes. What's wrong with you? Are you still feeling unwell? You drank so much last night. If it wasn't for Eric, you might have been. Sofia Coppola asked with concern when she saw the girl's teary eyes. Soon, the girl felt that it was better not to mention what had happened last night. I'm fine. Jennifer Connolly shook her head. She hesitated for a moment before asking. Then what about him? Him? Oh, you mean Eric. He went back, Sofia Coppola said. The girl shrank into the blanket. She could not help but feel disappointed. After Sofia Coppola said a few words, she pulled over a small stool beside the dressing table and sat down. She asked in a gossipy manner, Hey Jenny, what's going on between you and Eric? He was so angry last night because of you. He almost got into a fight with the person who brought you here. Anyone can tell that he likes you a lot. However, he said that he hasn't seen you for a year? Jennifer Connolly was stunned when she heard this. She just shook her head and did not answer. She really did not know how to answer. Seeing that the girl was unwilling to speak, Sofia did not force her. She continued, Oh yes, when he left last night he took out your address book and called a person named Jim Rester. He asked him to look for him at 10 in the morning. Jim Rester is your agent, right? The girl was stunned again. She softly hummed in acknowledgement. At the same time, a faint expectation rose in her heart. This expectation was not for her acting career, but because she heard that the guy was still paying attention to her. As Sofia Coppola was chattering, a maid knocked on the bedroom door and said, Miss, it's time for breakfast. Oh, we'll be right there, the girl replied. Then, she said to Jennifer Connolly, Get up quickly. Let's go to the dining room together. More than 10 minutes later, Sofia pulled Jennifer Connolly, who had washed up simply, to the dining room downstairs. At this time, there were already a few people sitting in the dining room. Francis Coppola and his wife, Sofia's brother, Roman Coppola, and Nicolas Cage, who had not left last night. Seeing her daughter pulling Jennifer Connolly into the dining room, Francis Coppola greeted her kindly. Good morning, Miss Connolly. Did you have a good rest last night? Very well. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Coppola, Connolly said stiffly. Then she nodded at the others in the dining room. In the short conversation last night, Francis Coppola had looked at her as if he was sizing up a beautiful vase. But now his tone was like that of a kind elder. This surprised Connolly a little. The girl did not know how to react next, but she had already been pulled to the dining table by Sofia. The maid skillfully divided breakfast for the two of them. So, Sofia, you're really going to listen to that kid and not play the role of Marie Corleone? Francis Coppola waited for the two girls to sit down before he quickly changed the topic to his younger daughter. Hearing this, Connolly's little ears pricked up. She acutely sensed that the kid Francis Coppola was talking about was Eric Williams. Sofia quickly confirmed her guess. I think what Eric said makes sense. I don't have any acting experience in movies. I don't want to ruin Dad's hard work because of me. Chapter 318. Francis Coppola hurriedly said, No, Sofia, you have to believe in yourself. You have a lot of potential. Don't listen to that little guy's words. He's only 19 years old, and he's already achieved so much. Of course my daughter can do it too. Dad, I think Williams is right. Roman Coppola, Sofia Coppola's brother, suddenly raised his head and said, Roman. Francis Coppola glared at his son with dissatisfaction. Roman Coppola shrugged his shoulders and quickly lowered his head again. Cage had no intention of speaking at all. Although he agreed with Eric's point of view, because he had seen his cousin's performance before. That feeling, it was better not to say. Sofia saw that the atmosphere was starting to change. and hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Dad, don't say any more. I know you love me very much, and I love you very much too. So I hope that The Godfather 3 can be even better. I've already made up my mind. I'll start from small roles like Nick. Didn't Mr. Tim Burton recommend a girl named Winona Ryder to you before? I heard that her performance is very good. Maybe you can let her try. Francis Coppola glared at his son, and soon turned to his younger daughter somewhat dotingly. Okay, Sophia, I'll let that Winona Ryder try. Roman Coppola was helpless against his father's favoritism. After thinking for a while, he said to his sister with a smirk, Sophia, since it was Eric Williams who suggested it, you should ask him to compensate you with a role. Humph, I'm not as thick-skinned as you. The girl snorted softly and continued to eat her breakfast. Francis Coppola did not scold his son this time. Instead, he said with some emotion, Indeed, Eric Williams' movies are very good at creating stars. From the little boy in Home Alone to the actress from Australia at the end of the year, I think her name is Nicole Kidman. Now they are all A-list actors. I heard that Tom Cruise not only rejected the invitation of Ghost, but also spoke nonsense about the movie. What a stupid guy. Hey Dad, Cruise is one of my idols. How can you say that about him? Sofia Coppola raised her head in dissatisfaction. Sister, Dad is right. What Tom Cruise did this time was really stupid. Although he has been popular for 10 years, the box office results of his personal movies are very unstable. What's more, Tom Cruise has a fatal shortcoming. He doesn't have any popular movie series. In this case, once the movies he starred in encounter several box office failures in a row, he will quickly step down from the A-list star position. The girl was unconvinced and asked, Many famous actors in Hollywood don't have a series of movies to rely on. Roman Coppola continued, It doesn't matter if many people don't. For example, actors like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro can gain enough popularity with their acting skills. But Cruise is different. Do you remember the very popular Grease and an Officer and a Gentleman a long time ago? The girl nodded. Yes, I know. The male lead of Grease, John Travolta, and the male lead of An Officer and a Gentleman, Richard Gere, were both considered idols back then. But after all these years, who can still see their shadows in Hollywood? As for the reason, it's because after these two masterpieces, they were unlucky and didn't encounter any other popular movies. And Tom Cruise's path is similar to theirs. It's just that his luck is very good. Every few years, he can encounter a popular movie, which keeps him in the A-list position in Hollywood. But in Hollywood, luck is the most unreliable thing. Francis Coppola also nodded at his son, which was rare. Sofia Coppola also had a thoughtful look on her face. You mean to say that if he has another popular series, even if his popularity falls, he can still gather popularity through reboots and sequels? Of course. Look at Harrison Ford. His popularity declined a lot in the past few years, but last year, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, he easily returned to the A-list. Roman Coppola suddenly lowered his voice and said in a gossipy tone, Also, I heard at a party that Tom Cruise's very capable agent, who seems to be called Paula Wagner, had originally found a movie series for Cruise, but the adaptation rights of the related TV series were obtained by Eric Williams. Sofia Coppola immediately moved closer to her brother and asked with great interest, What TV series? I'll go look for a videotape. Roman Coppola stirred the plate in front of him with his fork and said, I think it's called Mission Impossible, but that TV series is very old. You definitely won't be able to find a videotape. Ahem, alright, let's stop chatting. Hurry up and eat. Francis Coppola said in dissatisfaction when he saw his son and daughter huddled together and whispered like two little mice conspiring. Then he said to Cage on the other side, Nick, work harder in Ghost this time. Try your best to build a good relationship with Eric Williams. It will definitely be of great help to your future development. I know, Uncle. Nicolas Cage nodded. Jennifer Connelly listened to the family casually talk about various Hollywood rules that most people would not know about. Although the Coppola family always talked to her from time to time so that she did not feel neglected at all, the girl still felt that she should not be here at all. After breakfast, Jennifer Connelly hurriedly said goodbye to the Coppola family. She was still thinking about another matter. Eric had asked her agent to go to Firefly to look for him at 10 o'clock today. As soon as she walked out of the Coppola family mansion, Jennifer Connelly saw a silver gray car parked far away more than 10 meters to the west of the Coppola family's gate. Her agent, Jim Rester, was anxiously looking at the gate. The moment he saw her come out, he immediately waved at the girl excitedly. Connelly quickened her pace and walked over. After receiving Eric's call last night, Jim Rester did not sleep well the whole night. He was in a state of slight excitement, but he could not contact Connelly. It was not until the morning that Jim Rester shamelessly called Tony Brandt. Although the other party's tone was very unpleasant, he still told him Connelly's whereabouts. Therefore, Jim Rester came to the Coppola family's gate early in the morning. However, after arriving, Jim Rester was a little uncertain. How could Jennifer Connelly be staying here? This was the house of Francis Coppola, one of the 4 great Hollywood directors. Therefore, he did not even have the courage to go forward. He could only wait foolishly near the gate, hoping that Jennifer Connelly would come out early so that he could bring the girl to Firefly Films. Although Eric did not say that the two of them would go together on the phone, Jim Rester naturally felt that Eric must have meant that. Moreover, with Jennifer Connelly, Jim Rester would feel more confident. "Morning, Jim." Jennifer Connelly walked to her agent's side and greeted him a little guiltily. However, the agent did not have much time to chat with her. He quickly said, "Jenny, get in the car. We'll talk on the way." Do I have to go too?" the girl asked hesitantly. Jim Rester nodded. "Of course. Eric Williams will definitely want to see you." The girl was pulled into the car by the agent in a daze. Then they soon arrived at the headquarters of Firefly Films. Jim Rester brought the girl to the front desk and said a few words to the receptionist. The receptionist looked at the records and said politely, "Sir, you must be Jim Rester, right? Mr. Williams has already told you to come. You can go directly to him." However, he did not mention this lady. Jennifer Connelly's gaze suddenly became a little gloomy. However, Jim Rester said, "Mr. Williams must have forgotten. Can you inform him that Miss Jennifer Connelly is also here? I believe he has already allowed us to go up together." The receptionist looked at Jennifer Connelly and nodded reluctantly. She picked up the phone and dialed for a while before saying, "Please go up. Mr. Williams' office is on the 7th floor, room 706. After Jim Rester thanked her, he led the girl to the elevator. In the elevator, Jim Rester hesitated for a moment before saying, "Jenny, this time, can you not be so willful?" Jennifer Connelly was silent for a moment before she nodded her head silently. Jim Rester breathed a sigh of relief and could not help but comfort her. Eric Williams is now single. Who knows how many women in Hollywood have their eyes on him? Moreover, he obviously likes you very much. If you can become his girlfriend, it will be a great help to your future development. Hollywood is very realistic. I think you must have experienced it very deeply this year. In the office, Eric was multitasking. While listening to Alan describe his work arrangements for the past few days, he lowered his head and quickly flipped through the information about Hollywood special effects companies that the consulting company had submitted. Eric did not look at the specific details. He was only looking for the information to see if there were any special effects teams that were more outstanding in his memory. He was still very superstitious about his memory. If there were some people who were outstanding in his memory from his previous life, in this time and space, with his help, they would definitely be able to do even better. Very soon, Eric found a familiar name. Stan Winston Studio. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.